Chapter 1103. Using the virus extracted from the undead to infect humans and turn them into undead, and then sell them. The price is 8 million. Dean clicked on the details of Virgin Undead, and saw the detailed classification that could be provided above. There were 4 major choices in terms of race: yellow-skinned East Asian race, white-skinned Caucasian race, black-skinned Negro race, and brown-skinned rare race. In addition, there was also a large area of choice in age. But the upper and lower limits were shocking, as low as a 3-year-old girl, as high as a 72-year-old woman. All have been trained vocal command control. Dean looked at the specific introduction and was surprised. The Virgin Undead here had actually been trained, and the method used was also the conditioned reflex method that he thought of. In addition, there were original ecological types, which referred to Virgin Undead that had not been trained. Moreover, the so-called Virgin Undead was the general name of the industry, which could be subdivided into virgin and non-virgin, such as an old woman whose age was up to 72 years old. It was almost impossible to be a virgin, but it also met the needs of a small number of people. The power is not strong, but the desire is endless. Dean quickly finished the tour. He could almost smell the bloody killing behind this industrial chain and the protection of the monstrous power. This was the collusion between officials and bandits, and it brought a lot of benefit. If he could sell one, it would be 8 million federal coins, and it was tax-free. If he could sell 10 or hundreds of them, it was enough to earn money that he could not spend in this life. Money always made people take risks and crazy. Dean took a deep breath and continued to look down. In addition to Virgin Undeads, there were ordinary undeads for sale. These undeads were captured from outside the city. Their bodies were rotten or incomplete. There were men and women, old and young. Their strength was assessed to have a total of 9 stars. But the highest level of undeads sold here was only 4 stars. The following 5 stars were all gray and could not be selected. The price of the lowest 1-star undead was 200,000. Dean was relieved. He still had more than 1 million in hand. He could not afford to buy the Virgin Undead, but it was no problem to get an ordinary undead back to study. He immediately placed the order and paid. When the payment page ended, he returned to the list. He continued to browse. Other than the walking corpses, there were also many pictures of monsters. These pictures were taken from various angles, as if the monsters were arranged by the photographer. The prices ranged from tens of thousands of yuan to tens of millions of yuan. Among them, there was a 9-star monster corpse. It was 97% preserved and had almost no damage. It was priced at 820 million yuan. Dean got the detailed data from Felix and knew the corresponding data for each star. In the Empire, the Magic Marks warriors were from the initial hunter to the middle abyss. 9 stars corresponded to the middle abyss. The upper abyss was called the Forbidden Magic Beast. As for the magic beasts at the level of the abyss, they were called the Demon Beast. Above the Fiend Celestial Beasts were the rarest 5 great Hell Beasts. Every one of them had abilities that surpassed the Fiend Celestial Beasts. Since the establishment of the Federation many years ago, only 5 of them had appeared, and they were all gone now. Destroying brain tissue with an electromagnetic nuclear weapon? Dean looked at the detailed introduction of the 9-star monster corpse. When he saw the method of killing it, he could not help but be surprised. What kind of weapon could kill a middle abyss monster unscathed? If this weapon was used in the war, wouldn't it be able to easily kill the middle abyss of the Empire? Thinking of this, he felt a chill in his heart. The strength of the Federation was more terrible than it looked on the surface. If they fought with the Empire, perhaps the Empire would not be their opponent. However, the Federation did not seem to be a monolithic block. He was going to ask Felix about the weapon after he left the black market. After a while, Dean saw many corpses of monsters. These monsters were sold on the black market, mainly to major consortia or some monster research institute. 2 hours passed quickly. Dean exited the black market shopping list and heard the middle-aged man knock on the door. He took off his helmet and got up to open the door. "Sir, did you shop?" the middle-aged man asked very modestly and politely. Dean nodded. "I bought it." The middle-aged man smiled faintly and said, "I forgot to tell you earlier, sir. The address of your purchase will be kept a secret in the black market. We will disguise the delivery as something else so that you won't be suspicious. Moreover, we will make an appointment with you in advance." "I know this." Dean filled in the address of the company. He had already asked Felix about these basic operations. The middle-aged man smiled and left the black market with Dean. "I'm just looking around. You go back first." Dean did not take the middle-aged man's car after leaving the hotel. The middle-aged man did not mind. He nodded and left on his own. Dean walked on the side of the road and asked Felix through the communicator. "Electromagnetic nuclear weapon to kill monsters?" Felix was a little surprised, but his eyes suddenly lit up and he said, "That's right, how could I have forgotten about this before? Haha, Mr. Dean, with your strength, it's very easy for you to hunt magical beasts. I can lend you a mecha, and you can catch a few magical beasts a month, and that would be equivalent to half a year's sales of a large corporation." Dean rolled his eyes. "I'm not asking you to give me ideas to make money. I'm asking what this thing is." Felix was stunned for a moment. He did not expect Dean to be unmoved. He could not help but frown and explain. "This is a special weapon that can directly destroy the brain of the monster. But it is mainly aimed at those monsters with hard bodies and weak brain tissue. It is not suitable for all monsters. Moreover, this kind of thing attacks indiscriminately, so it is banned by the military. It is generally used to kill monsters. Once the wandering teams find traces of a large monster, they will investigate in advance and scan the monster's body structure. After the complete analysis, they will choose the corresponding weapon to capture it. This can minimize the damage to the monster's body. The less damage, the higher the value. For example, the monster corpses that Hosk uses to make mechas can't be damaged more than 90%. Otherwise, the price will be reduced by at least half." Dean slightly raised his eyebrows. "So, the monsters are not a threat to you?" Felix smiled and said, "It's not that there's no threat. After years of war, the monsters have all been driven to the black domain outside the Circle of Peace. If a monster barges into the Circle of Peace alone, it's an act of suicide. But it's extremely difficult for our army to go deep into the black domain and catch all the monsters in one fell swoop, or drive them further away. There are too many monsters there. Although our weapons are powerful, but the resources are limited. Excessive fighting will consume the weapons. I heard from my father that a military expert analyzed that even if all the weapons and resources in the Federation are exhausted, we can only eliminate 1/3 of the monsters in the first continent. Therefore, as long as the monsters don't break into our peaceful zone, we won't launch a large-scale attack. After all, the demons are still eyeing us covetously outside. With the creativity and wisdom of humans, sooner or later, we will develop a new energy source. In the next few hundred years, we might be able to wipe out all the monsters and take back Earth, our home." "Few hundred years," Dean murmured. He stopped and looked up. The street lights were colorful, and the night sky was hazy. Although there were no clouds, there were no stars or moon. It was not like the pure and dazzling night sky of the Empire. He shook his head, turned off the communicator, and walked along the street. Chapter 1104. The next day, an express delivery was sent to Dean's company. It was a three-dimensional metal box that looked like a freezer. It was tightly packed. Dean used his X-ray vision to scan it. He saw that there was a blonde male undead with a ferocious face and an incomplete body. "Is it Mr. Chin Mo?" The one who sent the undead was a handsome robot. The chest was engraved with the logo of a large transportation group. It seemed to be just an ordinary transport robot. But Dean knew that it should be a special robot of the Black Network. After all, the latter had recorded his identity and address information. This was an important secret that the members of the Black Network were not willing to expose. It was impossible for the Black Network to easily give it to an ordinary company. "It's me." Dean came forward to sign. The robot scanned the identity information in his communicator. After confirming, it put the things in front of the company's door. It said in a very friendly manner, "Mr. Cheen, do you need me to help you open it and send it in?" "Yes." Dean nodded. There was no handling robot in the company for the time being. If he brought this big guy to the company, it would most likely scare Ma Jing and the others to death. The handsome robot immediately carried the metal cabinet that stored the undead and followed Dean into the company. They came to Dean's exclusive office and put down the things in the designated position. "Mr. Cheen, do you have any other orders?" The robot smiled. "No, thank you." Dean sent the robot away. Then he used his X-ray vision to look at the undead in the metal cabinet. From the bone density and the degree of body mutation, it was only at the level of a primary hunter. Most of the body still retained the human appearance, but the decay and drying were not serious. Although it was not made by the Federation, it seemed that it was not the undead that mutated in the catastrophe 300 years ago. It may be caused by some travelers who went out of the Federation. There is a sponge inside. It is sound-absorbing and isolates all smells, including the air. Although the undead had not been trained, it was very quiet. It was mostly because the metal cabinet was isolated from the outside world. Even if it was shaken during the transportation, it behaved very well. It is not convenient to study this thing in the company. It seems that we have to find another place. Dean heard Ma Jing and the other two whispering about the production of regeneration medicine. Although the soundproofing material of the office was very good, but it was useless in front of his ultrasonic hearing. In case the undead wailed during the experiment, most of them would be aware of the abnormal sound. Dean was not in a hurry to open the metal cabinet. He jumped on the sofa and turned on the communicator to search for a suitable house. After searching for half an hour, he finally picked an abandoned graphene battery factory in the suburb. The annual rent was 350,000 renminbi. The area was large, thousands of square meters. Moreover, it did not include the green space and parking lot in the factory. Dean didn't inspect it. He watched it through the video for a moment. He felt that it was suitable, so he placed the order. It had to be said that in the technology-based Federation, there were many things that were very convenient. Dean went to the second-hand car market and spent 30,000 renminbi to buy a minivan. After picking up the car, he drove to the company and asked the robot security outside the company to help carry the metal box to the car. Then he drove it to the abandoned battery factory. The battery factory was seriously polluted. Several nearby drainage ditches were full of black mucus and unrecognizable substances. Dean took a tour around the factory. Except for the poor environment, everything else was okay. It was quiet and sparsely populated. The nearest commercial street was 10 minutes' drive. There were almost no pedestrians on the road outside the factory. After putting the metal box away, Dean drove back to the company and hauled the equipment that he had purchased to study the undead. After a few trips, his driving skills were already completely proficient. The cars and road markings of the Federation were vastly different from those of the olden era. Fortunately, he could use the communicator to share his knowledge, and there were teaching videos inside. With his control and reaction speed, as well as his near-photographic memory, he would be able to learn everything after watching the tutorial twice. The latest progress of the demon attack. After hauling the equipment to the factory, Dean looked at the hottest news in the North Desert City. Although he was busy with the company's affairs in the past 2 days, He was always paying attention to Lucien's affairs. He saw that the news was good news. It was an official announcement that they had captured several demon accomplices. Dean's mouth slightly twitched when he saw the word "only." He looked at the picture and saw a young man with a pockmarked face. His eyes were dull, and there was a hint of ruthlessness in them. This was the first accomplice that was captured. His name, identity, place of work and address were listed. In addition, it was mentioned that this person believed in pantheon religion. Then there was the second picture. It was a middle-aged man with a very clean beard. His appearance was ordinary. There was a mole on the corner of his mouth. He was wearing a blue and white striped shirt. It was very simple. There was also a lot of information about him. Dean looked down. A total of 4 people were captured. They were called demon accomplices. In addition, there was a video of the demon attack. The person in the first picture was in the mall that Lucien had rushed into. The video was from the surveillance of the mall. The person in the emergency exit did not rush out along with the crowd. Instead, he struggled to run back to the mall. Some experts said that he was rushing back to save his accomplices. Dean's eyes narrowed. He found that his eyes directly penetrated through the communicator. He saw his wrist instead of the internal structure of the person in the video. He was startled for a moment. His X-ray ability couldn't see through the video and the picture. Even the thermal vision was lost. He thought for a moment and zoomed in on the video. He carefully stared at the picture. Every frame was slowly played in his eyes. His expression. Dean noticed that the expression of the person was very anxious and even a little frightened. But his body was constantly being pushed by the crowd towards the exit. The expression was very realistic. It didn't look like a disguise. It could be seen that he was really very anxious. In such a case, the power he showed seemed somewhat insignificant. It was still within the scope of the power of an ordinary person. Is he just an ordinary person? Dean's eyes flashed. There was a trace of seriousness in his eyes. He then looked at the evidence on the screens of the other 3 people. 2 of them were also in the mall, and they were acting suspiciously. One was shouting loudly, and the other's chest was bulging abnormally. The last person was on the street, acting like a madman, kneeling on the ground and kowtowing non-stop. Lucien's appearance in the mall was completely unexpected. It's impossible for there to be 4 demons in the vicinity of this small mall. Even if they were secretly trained by other forces, it's impossible to release them without supervision. Dean suddenly thought of something and immediately contacted Felix through the communicator. "Have you seen the news of North Desert City?" Dean asked in a cold voice. "Wait a minute," Felix said, and then said a few words to the others over the communicator. After a while, he said to Dean, "I was in a meeting. Of course I have seen the news of North Desert City. This time the trouble is too big. I don't know how many pairs of eyes in the Federation are staring at it. Fortunately, they didn't find you. It seems that you are safe." Dean knew that he was safe the moment he saw the 4 demon accomplices. He was a bit surprised as to why the other party didn't find him, but he naturally wouldn't take the initiative to provoke trouble. He asked, "The 4 demon accomplices they caught should be scapegoats, right?" Felix was a bit surprised. "How do you know?" "Nonsense. How can there be so many demons near a small mall? According to this ratio, there are many demons in the entire North Desert City," Dean said. Chapter 1105. Dean quickly glanced at the resumes of the 4. He saw the problem. 3 of the 4 demon accomplices had one thing in common. They believed in 10,000 Gods sect. "What is this 10,000 Gods sect?" Dean asked Felix. Felix was surprised. "You know it so soon?" "It's a long story. The 10,000 Gods sect is the largest religion in the Federation. Their believers are spread across all levels of society. Several members of the Rockwell Consortium are believers of the 10,000 Gods sect." "Religion?" Dean slightly frowned as he thought of the Holy Church in Sylvia. It seemed that religious creeds could take root and multiply in any form of society, whether backward or advanced. Was it because humans were creatures that needed faith to survive? The demon attack in North Desert City caused a sensation. They didn't interrogate you. I guess they want to use this incident to make an example out of you. You are the main culprit. They want to attack the 10,000 Gods sect. This is what the presidents of the Federation have always wanted to do. When the faith reaches a certain level, then it becomes power. Felix said, the 10,000 Gods sect has crossed the line. There was a trace of understanding in Dean's eyes. No wonder he wasn't arrested as a suspect. He didn't expect that the Federation's infighting would be so fierce. They could find an opportunity to fight against the 10,000 Gods sect. He thought for a moment and said, from your tone, you don't seem to be a believer of the 10,000 Gods sect. Felix smiled proudly and said, of course. I don't believe in gods and ghosts. If there really are gods, why do you demons still exist? Can't gods destroy demons? If so, then how can they be called gods? It seems that your awareness is quite high, Dean said. Felix laughed. I wouldn't have today's position if I didn't have this awareness. This time we caught several believers of the 10,000 Gods sect. I think they will take the opportunity to fight with the 10,000 Gods sect. We can take this opportunity to secretly make a fortune. How is your company? Do we have enough funds? Dean heard a hint of ridicule in his voice. He guessed that the reason why he gave him 1 million was because he estimated that the money would be spent soon. Dean said, the funds are sufficient. There will be a large amount of money when the company opens. Let's not talk about it for the time being. Look for the information about the church and send it to me. Felix was a little surprised, but then he laughed in his heart. Stubborn duck, let's see how long your company can last. When the time comes, you'll still have to beg me. In the evening, Dean watched the news from North Desert City. He found that the news had shifted from the 4 demon accomplices to the Church of God. There was a severe attack on them. However, they didn't directly say that the followers of the Church of Gods were the accomplices of the demons. Instead, they said that some of the demon accomplices liked to disguise themselves as followers of the Church of God. It seemed that the federal government didn't want to completely tear the face of the Church of God. The core philosophy of the Myriad Deity sect was deeply rooted in the hearts of every citizen of the Federation. It said that all things had spirits and that all things would give birth to gods, including pots, bowls, ladles, and other utensils. There was a pot god for pots, a bowl god for bowls, a road god for roads, an earth god, and so on. It was almost impossible for the federal government to completely overthrow this concept. After all, many high-level government officials even believed that all things had a god. Therefore, they were very smart to choose a roundabout way to discredit the Church of God. There was no problem with the Church of Gods, but the believers of the Church of Gods were a place of hiding filth. What a good move to frame them! Dean sighed in his heart. These people were good at playing politics, but they were good at shady people. This preemptive strike was enough to cause a heavy blow to the Church of Gods. However, he had inexplicably provided them with a knife to kill each other. If the 7 kings of the empire sneaked in and stirred up the storm, I don't think a single soldier would be needed to break the Federation's infighting. Dean shook his head. There was an inexplicable disappointment in his heart. He didn't pay any more attention to it. It was estimated that the Church of Gods would counterattack. In a short period of time, the news would become a bit lively, but it had nothing to do with him. After preparing the equipment, Dean came to a dilapidated office in the factory. He had transformed it into a simple laboratory. Although the house was simple, the equipment inside was expensive and high-end. Dean released the golden undead from the metal box. The undead's hands and feet were locked by the connected chains in the box. It roared at Dean. Dean didn't respond to its hideous body and face. He took a small scalpel and cut a piece of rotten flesh from its body. Then he used the equipment to test the composition and genes. Soon, the genes in the undead's flesh were tested. There was a big difference between the genes of humans. It didn't have the ability to divide. No wonder the wounds of the undead couldn't heal. However, although it couldn't divide, it could transform into other forms when it was stimulated by external forces. Dean felt that a new door was opened in front of him. He was completely immersed in the experiment and forgot to eat and sleep. In the blink of an eye, it was the 7th day since the establishment of the company. Dean estimated that the production of the regenerative medicine should be almost finished. He drove to the company early in the morning. He found that Ma Jing and the other two were there. They were lying on their desks and sleeping. It seemed that they had spent the night in the company. Dean's eyes flashed. His line of sight quickly fell on an instrument in the regenerative medicine laboratory. There was a curved light green tube behind the instrument. There were 3 small bottles in front of the instrument. It seemed to be the regenerative medicine. Dean didn't suppress his footstep. He walked into the company. Ma Jing and the other 2 who were lying on their desks were quickly awakened. They were surprised to see Dean's arrival. Ma Jing's sleepiness was swept away. She immediately stood up and excitedly said to Dean, "Boss, we succeeded. 6 days. It only took us 6 days to produce it." 3 bottles? Dean asked. "How do you know?" Ma Jing was stunned, but she didn't think about it. She excitedly said, "Yes, I will show you now. The effect of the regenerative medicine is too strong. Once the finished product is produced, it will definitely cause a sensation." Dean saw her run into the laboratory and took out the 3 small bottles. He asked, "How was the experiment?" Chapter 1106. Dean looked at the 3 small bottles in his hand. So, these 3 bottles of medicine only need to be tested on the human body to be able to be marketed on the market. Ma Jing nodded again and again. "Although testing on the human body is the most troublesome and the most difficult hurdle, but we are confident. In that case, I'll go and recruit a few people to test the medicine." "Prepare the test contract," Dean said. In fact, even if there was no test, he knew that there wouldn't be any big problems with the regenerative medicine in his hand. As long as they strictly follow the formula given by him, there would be a 100% success rate. Ma Jing and the other 2 were the pharmaceutical elites that he had recruited. They had participated in a lot of drug development and production. The possibility of mistakes was very small for them to follow the formula. So the 3 bottles of regenerative medicine in their hands were basically equivalent to finished products. However, there was a rule in the Federation that the drug must go through human testing and review before it could become a legal drug. Dean came to his office and used the communicator to open several recruitment websites. He posted the recruitment of testers. In order to save time, he gave a high salary of 10,000 yuan. Generally, testers would work for a long time from the first trial to the final product. If they were lucky, they could try 3 or 4 times. If they were unlucky, they could try more than 10 times or even lose their life. This also led to a relatively high salary for testers. Generally, it was about 8,000 to 20,000 yuan. In contrast, the remuneration given by Dean was not bad. After the recruitment was posted, Dean contacted the customer service of the website and transferred 20,000 yuan to them. He asked them to help put the recruitment on the homepage. Half an hour later, someone contacted him. "I want to apply for a job as a tester." There was a stuttering and timid voice on the other side of the phone, but it seemed to be the voice of a middle-aged man. Dean asked, "Have you seen the recruitment notice? Do you agree with our conditions?" I agree, the man hurriedly said. Dean said, "Then come to our company tomorrow." Well, is it true that the remuneration will be paid on the same day?" the man carefully asked. Dean said, "It's true. Come to test the medicine tomorrow and pay the money tomorrow." "Really? That's great. Thank you. That person hurriedly expressed his gratitude, somewhat excited. Dean didn't say anything more. He hung up the communication and sighed. Although he didn't see the person, but he could feel that the person was most likely a low-level civilian who was forced by life. After all, being a drug tester was a dangerous profession. It could not even be called a profession. Usually, only those who were short of money or had contracted some kind of disease and had no money to treat it would become a drug tester. The price they had to pay was that even though they might be able to temporarily alleviate their urgent needs, they would still be tormented by the injuries caused by the drug tester for the rest of their lives. They would be in pain for the rest of their lives, and they might even commit suicide out of depression. It didn't take long for Dean's communicator to ring. It was another job seeker. Dean frowned slightly. He felt that he needed a secretary. It would take too much time to open a company. He didn't want to spend all his energy on it. Soon, he posted a secretary recruitment on the website again. This time, he did not give money to the website to help with the recommendation. Being a secretary was a popular occupation. Rather than giving money to the website, he might as well add it to the salary of the secretary. The next day, Dean took Ma Jing and the other two to the company to receive the drug testers. Yesterday, a total of 17 people called him. After 10 o'clock in the evening, the website's recommendation was removed, and no one continued to call him. Generally, the drug testers must have more than 3 people, and all of them must be qualified to pass the review. He only kept the first 3 people and rejected all the others. After all, in his eyes, the drug itself was a finished product, and the price was expensive. Not to mention that he gave them a sky-high price drug, he also gave them money. Such a good thing may not happen in the entire Federation. Let me see your injuries. In the office, Dean, Ma Jing and the other 2 sat on one side, and the other 3 candidates sat on the other side. 2 of them looked uncomfortable, and the other middle-aged man looked very calm. At a glance, Dean found that the middle-aged man's temperament was somewhat tough, different from ordinary people. He had a kind of military spirit, but also a bit of luxury. Such a person should not be doing this for money. Dean had observed the bodies of the 3 people when they arrived. At this moment, he was just walking, so as not to make Ma Jing and the other 2 suspicious. This is my injury. The middle-aged man on the far left was nervous and stuttered. He raised his left hand and saw that a finger was missing. It was wrapped in gauze and there was blood. Even Ma Jing and the other 2 could see that it was an injury from yesterday. Your finger, did you break it yesterday? Ma Jing couldn't help but ask. The middle-aged man was nervous and uneasy. I accidentally broke it yesterday morning. I heard that you are studying regenerative medicine. Should I meet your recruitment requirements? Ma Jing suddenly understood and said with a smile, in that case, your luck is really good. Our medicine basically has no defects. If nothing goes wrong, your finger will grow back, and you can also get 10,000 yuan for the trial fee. The middle-aged man's eyes lit up when he heard 10,000 yuan. His heartbeat accelerated a few beats. Dean could see at a glance that his fingers were broken at night, which was not long after the call with him ended. The purpose was probably for the 10,000 yuan. 10,000 yuan for a finger should be a good deal for the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man with thick eyebrows and big eyes, who was sitting in the middle, glanced at the man on the left. There was a hint of mockery in his eyes, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he lifted up his shirt and took it off, revealing his sturdy chest. However, there were several deep scars on his chest. Below the scars there was a pit and there was actually a piece of flesh missing. Money is not a problem. Can your regenerative medicine cure my injury? It has already scabbed, the middle-aged man said. Ma Jing and the other 2 screamed out in fear as they saw the middle-aged man's body. No problem, Dean calmly said. The middle-aged man looked at him. Are you the boss? What's your name? Dean slightly frowned. You are here to test the medicine, not to test the boss. The middle-aged man was stunned for a moment before he chuckled and said, Well said. I hope your medicine works. Otherwise, I will be very disappointed. Ma Jing and the other two could see that the middle-aged man's identity wasn't ordinary. But his tone made them uncomfortable. Ma Jing curled her lips. Our medicine is certainly useful. You are taking advantage of us. Otherwise, you may not be able to afford it when our medicine is on the market. Chapter 1107. Ma Jing was so angry that she wanted to hit the table, but she suddenly remembered that Dean was next to her. She immediately suppressed her anger and checked the identity of the last tester. Then she took them to the laboratory for a physical examination. After the examination, all three of them met the requirements of the testers they recruited: healthy, no other diseases, and body defects. This is the regenerative medicine. Now I will inject it into you. Ma Jing took out 3 developed regenerative medicine. Dean was watching her. She looked slightly dignified and nervous. She took a deep breath and took out 3 syringes. She inhaled the regenerative medicine into the syringes. Then she came to the slightly timid middle-aged man and said, Relax your body. Don't be nervous. I'm not nervous. The middle-aged man stuttered. His face turned red. Ma Jing was speechless. She was too lazy to persuade him again. She injected the regenerative medicine into his arm. For a time, everyone's eyes were focused on the middle-aged man. Ma Jing didn't continue to inject the second person. If the first person failed, then there was no need to continue to inject harm to others. How do you feel? Ma Jing and the middle-aged man stared at each other for 2 minutes. She finally couldn't help but ask. The middle-aged man scratched his head. It seems that my body is a bit hot. Do you feel uncomfortable? Ma Jing asked. No. The middle-aged man suddenly looked nervous. Ma Jing immediately winked at the other two. They came forward to draw the blood of the middle-aged man and took it to the side for testing. The middle-aged man suddenly exclaimed when they went to test, It's itchy. The middle-aged man hurriedly tore off the bandage. The wound was really new and hadn't healed yet. The sticky gauze tore the skin and a lot of blood flowed out. The middle-aged man didn't seem to feel the pain. He wanted to reach out and scratch. Ma Jing was shocked. She quickly grabbed his hand. Don't move. It will be infected. But it's itchy. The middle-aged man was a little impatient. Ma Jing stared at him. Even if it's itchy, you have to endure it. The middle-aged man's face was deathly pale. He clenched his teeth, and in less than half a minute, the blood on his finger suddenly stopped flowing. Then, in front of everyone's shocked eyes, the scar on the finger slowly protruded and grew at a speed visible to the naked eye. After 4 or 5 minutes, a pink finger gradually took shape. During this process, the laboratory was silent, and someone suddenly let out a sharp gasp, breaking the silence. It can actually regenerate. This medicinal effect is too strong. We did it. Ma Jing and the other two stared blankly at this scene. The effect of the drug was beyond their expectations. Although they had seen similar scenes on mice, they were mice after all. Who would have thought that the effect would be so terrifying when used on humans? Dean was relieved when he saw this scene. Although he was full of confidence, after all, it was not confirmed. There was always a possibility of an accident. What's wrong? Can you feel your fingers? Can you move them? After the shock, Ma Jing quickly reacted. Her eyes were full of fanaticism as she stared at the middle-aged man. It seemed that she wanted to dig out all the feelings and thoughts in his mind at this moment. It was the first time for the middle-aged man to be looked at so passionately by a woman. He immediately felt nervous and inexplicable restlessness. His heartbeat quickened as he mumbled, "It's a little itchy, but I can move around." After saying that, he bent his finger and felt that it was no different from his previous fingers. What's more, this finger was more sensitive and could feel the weak airflow and temperature in the air. Ma Jing was more excited as she looked at the middle-aged man's fingers. She looked at Dean and said in a trembling voice, "Boss, we really succeeded. We have created a regenerative medicine. We will change the entire Federation's pharmaceutical industry." Dean was very calm as he knew that she was excited. He said, "Let's test the remaining 2 first. Don't be too happy." Ma Jing recovered and nodded. She wanted to say that even if the other 2 failed, as long as one succeeded, it would be enough to prove that the regenerative medicine was feasible. It was just a lack of time to perfect it. "It's really possible." The middle-aged man's pupils shrank as he saw the scene. His eyes flashed with a trace of enthusiasm. He couldn't wait to raise his arm as Ma Jing picked up the syringe and came to him. Ma Jing didn't like him. She snorted as she saw his reaction. But she still injected him seriously. The robust middle-aged man looked down at the scar and the missing pit on his chest. His eyes were filled with excitement and nervousness. Although the others had succeeded, his injury had been there for too long. It had already scabbed. Who knew if it would regenerate? Moreover, everyone's physique was different. That's why the regulations required more than 3 testers to pass the test in order to be approved for the market. 5 minutes passed. Ma Jing's face slightly changed as she saw that there was no change in his body. "What's wrong? Do you feel anything?" The middle-aged man's face turned slightly ugly. "My whole body is hot and the wounds are a bit itchy." Ma Jing was relieved. It should be the same as his situation. There should be an effect soon. "You have more injuries and it will take a while." When the middle-aged man heard what she said, he secretly prayed in his heart. After 2 or 3 minutes, the middle-aged man gritted his teeth and growled. Ma Jing was shocked as she took a few steps back. "What's wrong with you?" "It's itchy," the middle-aged man growled. Dean, who was standing next to the middle-aged man, stepped forward with a scalpel in his hand. He quickly cut the scars on the middle-aged man's body. Blood overflowed from the scars, but the bleeding soon stopped. Then the scars quickly healed. The scars were stained with blood and seemed to wither. Soon, new flesh grew under the scars. In addition, the pit in the abdomen of the middle-aged man slowly filled up. It didn't take long for tender flesh to grow out. "It's a success." The middle-aged man's eyes widened as his body trembled with excitement. Ma Jing and the others were relieved and couldn't help but cheer out loud. After the sturdy middle-aged man's body had completely recovered, Ma Jing injected the 3rd person. Soon, the medicine took effect again, and the 3rd person's broken arm grew back. The whole process took about half an hour, and as soon as the arm grew back, the man shouted that he was hungry and then fainted. "We did it!" Ma Jing and the others couldn't hold back anymore. They hugged each other in excitement. As medical professionals, they naturally knew what regenerative medicine meant. They knew how terrifying the market was. Chapter 1108. Dean's reaction was very calm when Ma Jing and the other 2 were cheering excitedly. He knew that the real difficulty had just come. Although the rejuvenation drug was made by him, it was still unknown whether it would belong to him or not. "It's really reborn." The middle-aged man sighed with emotion. He stretched out his hand and gently stroked the tender flesh of his abdomen. The touch was so clear and delicate that he could even feel the roughness of fingerprints. He was amazed by this magical drug. Then he thought of something. His eyes skipped over the cheering, excited Ma Jing and the other 2 and saw Dean's calm expression. "Boss, you don't seem to be surprised?" The middle-aged man was curious. He put away his contempt for the young man. He knew that the person who could make such a drug would soon shock the entire Federation. Ma Jing and the other 2 were surprised to see that Dean was not too excited. The surprise in their hearts faded a bit and they calmed down. "There is nothing to be surprised about. It's all expected." Dean casually said, "Since the test is completed, I will transfer the reward to your account. Please go back. If there is any need for the drug review in the future, maybe I will contact you again. I hope you can help." The somewhat cautious and timid middle-aged man and the third young man nodded again and again. They said some words of gratitude and got up to leave. You don't want to leave? Dean looked at the indifferent middle-aged man and slightly frowned. Few people will drive me away. The middle-aged man smiled and said, My name is Yao Jie. I am fortunate to meet you. May I know your name? My name is Qin Mo. Dean looked up and down at the man. He felt that his name was familiar. Soon he remembered that this name was mentioned in the news of the demon attack on the North Desert City. He was a famous general of the Federation. But he didn't know in detail. There was no photo of him in the news. Qin Mo? Yao Jie nodded slightly. Mr. Qin, you've cured my body. I can't repay your kindness. If Mr. Qin runs into any trouble in the future, you can look for me. I'll send you my contact number. Dean directly said, I have seen your name in the recent news of the demon attack. It seems that you are a general. I can see that your temperament is meticulous. You are sitting and standing upright. Are you the general? Ma Jing and the other two were shocked as they heard Yao Jie's words. They were stunned. Was this man a general? A general of the army was sitting in front of them? Yao Jie shook his head. I didn't expect Mr. Qin to recognize me despite being so low-key. I'm Yao Jie from the 3rd Division of the Federation. Hello, Mr. Qin. Hello. Dudian nodded. He was slightly speechless. Why would you expose your name if you want to be low-key? Ma Jing and the other two couldn't help but open their mouths wide when they saw him admit it. They didn't expect that such a big shot who could appear in the Federation news would appear in front of them. Ma Jing reacted the fastest and quickly said, General Yao, please forgive me if I offended you earlier. I was blind. Ma Jing saw that he didn't seem to care. She was relieved. General Yao, it's our blessing to be able to help you. General Yao, your injury should be caused by the monster. Ma Jing saw that he didn't seem to care. She was relieved. General Yao, it's our blessing to be able to help you. General Yao, your injury should be caused by the monster, right? I heard that the Armed Combat Department is mainly in charge of quelling the hidden threats of other races in the cities. Things like the infiltration of monsters into the cities, or the recent attack by the demons, are all handled by the Armed Combat Department. I heard that every member of the Armed Combat Department has extraordinary abilities and can fight 10 enemies at once. Is that true? Yao Jie heard her flattering words. He laughed. It's not as exaggerated as the rumors say. I don't have extraordinary abilities, but it's not difficult to fight against 10 people. Dean was a little surprised. He could see that Yao Jie's physique was that of an ordinary person. But he could fight against 10 people. Did he have extremely exquisite fighting skills? Yao Jie didn't pay attention to Ma Jing and the other two. He turned to look at Dean. He found that the young man's expression was still calm. He couldn't help but smile. Mr. Qin, looking at your age, you should have just graduated. At such a young age, you are able to develop the miracle of regenerative medicine. The younger generation will surpass us in time. Dean shook his head. I haven't graduated yet. I'm currently in school. That's even more powerful. Yao Jie exclaimed. It was the first time that Ma Jing and the other two knew about Dean. They couldn't help but look at him in astonishment. The big boss they followed was actually a student. Thinking of this, the three of them felt speechless and embarrassed. They had been struggling in society for so many years, but in the end, they ended up working for a student. All these years had been in vain. Mr. Qin, I have to remind you. Yao Jie's smile suddenly disappeared after he praised Dean. He said seriously, once your regenerative medicine comes out, it will definitely cause a big earthquake in the entire medical industry. Although it's a bit cruel, I have to tell you that there may be many people who want to buy the production rights of this medicine from you. They might even rob it. Moreover, it's likely that you will encounter trouble in the review. Hearing his words, Ma Jing and the other two were stunned. Their faces suddenly became a little ugly. They were all old foxes in the society, so they immediately thought of the stakes in it. Dean's face was surprised, then confused, and finally frowned. Yao Jie comforted him. I'll help you in the review. They won't embarrass you. How difficult? Dudian asked. Yao Jie smiled. He was still too young. The review information you submitted is enough to expose the importance of this regenerative medicine. It's likely to arouse some people's greed and let you fail the review. Even if you provide all the information you need, as long as the other party wants to find fault with you, they will be able to find it. They can delay your review time while they quickly copy the information and develop the same batch of regeneration medicine. Then, they will announce the birth of the medicine. At that time, they will be the rightful owner. In turn, they can sue you for theft. Moreover, plagiarizing research technology is a felony in the Federation. At least 10 years in prison. Ma Jing and the other two couldn't help but shiver when they heard this. 10 years in prison, a person would basically be ruined. Dean was like a young man who just came out of the society. He was angry and asked, "If what you said is true, won't the same thing happen to other medicines? If that's the case, who would dare to study such an excellent medicine?" Yao Jie shook his head and said, "If it's an ordinary medicine, it's naturally not worth it for others to take this risk. However, the value of your medicine is too high, so there will definitely be people who are willing to take the risk. This isn't the first time something like this has happened. You've seen many famous medicines in the market, some sensational medicines, but behind them, how many bloody wars have you not seen? Moreover, it's very difficult for the Federation to manage this kind of thing. Unless you are a big group or have a deep background, it's not difficult for a small company like yours to take away your result." Dean angrily said, "Doesn't the Federation care about it? The result of this will only be the killing of geniuses and the killing of good medicine. This is caused by the environment. There is no way to change it. It's not something that can be changed by one or two people." Yao Jie shook his head slightly. He had seen too many such things. He was used to it. If Dean's medicine didn't cure his injury, he would be too lazy to remind him. Dean was silent. He didn't act at this moment. After a long silence, he said, "I know. Thank you, General Yao. The people from the review department won't embarrass us." Yao Jie nodded slightly. "But this is just the first hurdle. It is estimated that a big group will soon come to buy your company. If you don't want to take the risk, you can sell the company. If you want to struggle, you can find me. I will repay the kindness of your treatment." "I will consider it," Dean said. Chapter 1109. Yao Jie didn't stay for long. He said a few words to Dean and left the company. Dean sent Yao Jie to the door of the company and watched him leave in an ordinary taxi. His eyes flashed slightly. He hesitated for a moment and gave up the plan to track down Yao Jie. Is the visit of the general responsible for arresting the demon attack to test something, or is it purely an accident? Dean frowned. If the latter had come to test him, then he would expose himself by following them. Moreover, he couldn't figure out the real reason for Yao Jie's visit. He was a Federation general and had a distinguished identity. How could he anonymously come to be a tester? In case there was a problem with the medicine and Yao Jie was poisoned to death, then the reputation of the general would be ruined. Even his death would be a bit funny. Moreover, with his identity, if he really wanted to treat him, he only needed to say something. A small company like Dean's would obediently deliver the medicine to him. Why would he need to come in person? But if it wasn't to test the medicine, why would he take the risk to test him? If he was suspicious, then he could directly arrest him and bring him back for interrogation. Dean couldn't figure out these two contradictions, but he felt that there must be something he had overlooked. After carefully thinking for a long time, Dean suddenly thought of a possibility. Yao Jie's abdomen was not only missing a piece of meat, but the internal organs under that piece of meat were also lost. This led to a big hidden danger in his body. He would gradually become thinner and weaker. Perhaps not many people knew about this hidden danger. Yao Jie didn't want others to know, so he didn't send people to get the medicine from him. Instead, he sneaked over. Although there was a risk of death, but it was only a small number. The latter obviously chose to take the risk. Dean didn't know whether it was crazy or rational. The more Dean thought about it, the more he felt that it was the case. As for why the latter told his name and exposed his identity, perhaps it was because his body had been cured and he didn't care about being exposed. Even if his enemies knew, they wouldn't be able to target him. It seems that being a general is not easy, Dean thought. He suddenly regretted that he didn't chase after him. If the latter sneaked over, he certainly didn't alarm the people of the military to monitor him. If he tracked him, he could find out the address of the general. If he knew the address of his family, then it would be even easier. He would have one more card in his hand. These generals were high-ranking members of the Federation, and their families' identities and other private matters were confidential and protected. Even a young master of a large financial group like Felix didn't have the right to know. Although regretful, Dean didn't continue to be annoyed. It would only continue to waste his time meaninglessly. Stopping losses was the basic rationality of a wise man. He turned back to the company. As soon as he returned to the office, Ma Jing and the other two knocked on the door and ran in. They said worriedly, "Boss, what General Yao said may happen. What should we do?" Dean said, "This is not your concern. I recruited you to help me make the drugs, not to let you operate the product. Do you want to earn extra money from me? I won't give you a raise if you do this." Ma Jing and the other two were stunned. They didn't expect him to joke around. Ma Jing smiled. "Boss, we are just worried about the situation of the company. The company is our home." Dudian waved his hand and said, "Don't think of the company as your home. Home is home. There is only one workplace. If you feel comfortable and can make money, that is the best. Even if the environment is bad, you have to endure it. If you have nothing to do, then I will recruit people to be responsible for the promotion of our medicine. While the news hasn't been leaked, we should release it as early as possible. If you want to snatch it, you have to be willing to fight." Ma Jing and the other two had a strange look on their faces. It was the first time for them to see such a boss. However, Dean's words were reasonable. It was useless for them to worry as there was no solution to the problem. Dean issued a recruitment notice after sending off the three of them. At this time he felt that it would be good if Barton and Noyce were around. They could be trusted and could help him. The recruited people could leak company secrets at any time. But he couldn't slowly cultivate the loyalty of the employees. Even soldiers would find it difficult to maintain loyalty in the peaceful environment of the Federation. Not to mention ordinary people. They were driven by benefits. They worked for money and not for him. It's not difficult for me to sneak out of the Federation with my current identity. I can ask Felix to pick me up. If I cross the God of War's wall, then I can go through the clouds. The Federation has equipment to isolate thunder and lightning. It's enough to deal with the flock of thunderbirds, but it will take at least half a month to go back and forth. Moreover, Noyce and Barton will have to adapt to the environment of the Federation and learn about the world. Dean thought for a moment. He felt that they wouldn't solve the urgent situation. He had to wait for the situation to stabilize and then make a long-term plan. Even if he didn't advertise the rebirth medicine, it would still spread to the ears of some big shots in a few days. He had to let everyone know that this thing belonged to him before that happened. I can only do publicity and marketing. I have to let the people of the Federation know that this thing is made by me. I need a lot of advertising, but the advertising fee won't be low. Dean's eyes flashed. Some of the popular TV and news advertisements were calculated in millions. He only had hundreds of thousands in his hands. It wouldn't make a difference in the advertising industry. I can only try low-cost marketing. If the popularity isn't enough, then I will borrow from Felix. Although he can only come up with tens of thousands of savings, but as the president of Haas Company, he can use the company's name to mobilize a lot of funds. If he is found out, then he will be out of luck. But once the reputation of the regenerative medicine is out, the demand will exceed the supply and the funds will come back quickly. Dean's mind was racing as he thought about all kinds of things. Soon he made up his mind and decided to try low-cost marketing. He wrote a few marketing documents and was ready to hand them over to the recruited operations department. As he had bought advertising on the website, the recruitment was scrolling on the homepage. Soon people started to call him. Dean had a brief understanding and let them come over for an interview. On the way there was a secretary recruitment. Dean asked a few questions and felt that the conditions were roughly in line with the requirement. The communicator rang again in the evening. Dean thought that it was a job seeker's call. But he heard a rather calm and gentle voice. "Is this Boss Cheen?" Dean was surprised. "Who are you?" Chapter 11:10. "Yes," Dudian asked. "How much do you need?" Song Jin was relieved and smiled. "I'll take one first." "All right, the items are expensive, so come and get them yourself," Dudian said. "Okay." Song Jin agreed. After hanging up the communicator, it didn't take long for two people who had signed the VIP contract with Dean to come to him. Dean asked them to come directly tomorrow to collect the money and the goods. The next day, when Dean arrived at the company, there were already a lot of people waiting for him. One of them was the secretary he had recruited. She was a 27-year-old beauty named Zhuing. She looked very capable. She was not the kind of capable secretaries in general, but a real capable person. At first glance, one could tell that she was an efficient person. Dean casually learned about her and accepted her. Then he handed over the recruitment to her. Zhuing didn't expect her new boss to be so young. She was a little perturbed. She felt that Dudian was like a rich second generation who just came out to start a business. She had to think of other aspects as a secretary for such a person. She secretly made up her mind that if Dudian was just a playboy, she would take the initiative to resign and leave, even if the job was very rich. After handing over the chores to Zhuing, Dudian waited for the 3 VIP customers who came to buy medicine. He greeted them politely and took them to the reception room. He asked Zhuing to make 3 cups of tea and a cup of coffee because one of them was a brown-haired foreigner. "Boss Cheen, what about the medicine?" Song Jin asked after taking a sip of tea. Dudian called Zhuing and asked her to find Ma Jing to get the medicine. Dudian pushed the medicine in front of the 3 people. "The medicine has been sent for review. It will take 2 days for it to pass. It can't be sold on the market for the time being. But if you are in urgent need, then we can sell it to you now. There is no problem with the medicine. Our testers have tested it. By the way, one of them is General Yao Jie." "What?" Song Jin didn't hear clearly. "What general?" "General Yao Jie?" Beside him, Wang Donglin heard it clearly. His eyes widened slightly as he said, "You mean that General Yao Jie of the Armed Combat Department?" Dudian calmly asked. "Are there many generals with the same name?" Song Jin understood and looked at him suspiciously. "How is that possible? What kind of status does General Yao Jie have? Why would he be a drug tester for you? Even if he wants to test the medicine, do you dare to let him test it? No matter how daring I am, I wouldn't dare to use a general's tiger skin coat. You'll know when you investigate this matter. Also, I have the records of their drug testing here. I can show them to you." Dean called Zhuing and asked her to take the files of the testers from the safe. Then, facing the 3 people, he told them the whole story of Yao Jie's trial. At this time, Zhu Ying's drug tester file was also sent over. Dean handed it to the 3. Wang Donglin was the first to take it. He saw the photo and the name on the file. His eyes widened in disbelief. He was a soldier and had met Yao Jie several times. At a glance he recognized that the person was General Yao Jie. He didn't expect that such a famous person would work as a tester for Dean. Soon, he thought of another problem. He was surprised and asked Dean, "What kind of injury does General Yao have? Why does he need your medicine? Isn't it not good to pry into the privacy of the general?" Dean squinted at him. Wang Donglin smiled and said, "I didn't ask. I'll buy the medicine and I'll transfer the money to you now. If it is good, can I order another batch?" "Yes, according to the contract," Dean indifferently said. Wang Donglin was relieved. He immediately transferred the money to Dean and asked, "How to use the medicine?" "It's an injection." Dean asked Zhuing to bring a new syringe and handed it to Wang Donglin. "You can use it now. It will be effective immediately. If there is a problem here, I can't renege on the debt. They can also be witnesses. Come on." Wang Donglin was stunned. Was he being treated as a guinea pig? However, Dean's words were reasonable. Although there was General Yao Jie to test the medicine, but there was still a trace of uncertainty in his heart. After all, the medicine didn't pass the review. He hesitated for a moment but decisively rolled up his sleeves and injected the medicine. My 2 fingers were pressed by the slate. The situation was urgent, so I cut them off. I don't know if they will grow back. Wang Donglin glanced at his hands, then looked up and asked Dean, "How long will it take for the medicine to take effect?" 5 to 10 minutes, Dean said. Wang Donglin, Song Jin and the other brown-haired Martin were shocked. So fast. Song Jin looked at his watch and began to count down. Wang Donglin cried out when 4 minutes had passed. They saw that the flesh on his hand was slightly squirming. Flesh and bones slowly grew back. It didn't take long for 2 pink fingers to grow out. Seeing this scene, Song Jin and Martin, who were next to them, were dumbfounded. This is a miracle medicine." Song Jin was shocked and murmured. Things were completely expected. Dean accompanied Song Jin and Martin to complete the injection. Soon, all the missing parts of their bodies were regenerated. The 3 of them felt like they had been reborn. They exclaimed from time to time in the reception room. After finishing the medicine, the 3 of them immediately looked for Dean to place an order. Each of them ordered 5 portions of the medicine. This was the upper limit of their 1-star VIP status. The deposit for each portion was 50%, which was 1 million. Dean had 15 million as a deposit. Plus the 6 million that they had paid for the medicine, he had 21 million in his hand. It was enough to squander a little in the black market. "Mr. Qin, I want to upgrade my VIP status. Can I increase the annual fee?" Wang Donglin deliberately waited for Song Jin and Martin to leave and suddenly asked Dean. Dean glanced at him. This guy was very cunning. He said, 3-star and below can be done with money. But 4-star needs other conditions. I haven't thought about the specific conditions. Anyway, I don't plan to open it for the time being. If you want to upgrade, then pay 10 million more and I can upgrade you to a 3-star VIP. 10 million annual fee? Wang Donglin was speechless. Although he was a rich man in the North Desert City, 10 million annual fee was quite an amazing amount. This was not a comparison of assets, but pure annual expenses. Even some of the top clubs didn't need such a high annual fee. The upper limit of a 3-star VIP is 50 portions. It's 10 times more. Pay and return are equal. Dean indifferently said. Chapter 11:11. Wang Donglin did not immediately increase the annual fee but went back to allocate funds. After all, although he had money, a lot of the funds were in the various industries under his name. He needed to report the properties of these industries. On the same day, Dudian's company recruited several members of the planning and advertising department. Dudian asked Zhuing to gather them and then gave them the copy that he had written for them to do. After reading the copy, several members of the advertising department were stunned. They did not expect advertising could be played like this. The next day, There was such a news in the afternoon news of North Desert City. 2 people in a square had their eyes on the same clothes and quarreled. It escalated into a scuffle. One of them was pushed from the 2nd floor of the mall and broke his arm on the spot. Some people in the crowd called the police, but before the police could arrive, the person who pushed rushed down and took out something from his bag and injected it into the person who broke his arm. By the time the mobile police arrived, the person who broke his arm had already stood up from the ground. His body was intact. Under the mediation of the police, there was no intention to blame the person who pushed the person. This strange incident quickly attracted the attention of some people. Through the surveillance video, people found that the person who broke his arm was indeed broken, but it quickly healed. This strange incident quickly attracted the attention of the majority of the people in North Desert City. Soon, some netizens found an advertisement that was played in the back of an inconspicuous small TV series. The drug that was sold in this advertisement was called regenerative medicine. The effect was described to be very magical, even magical to the point that it was somewhat fake. After this advertisement was found, it quickly attracted people's attention when it was compared to the trending news. At the same time, that night, a few more hot topics popped up. They were all things that happened around the ordinary citizens of Mo Bay City. Among them, there were people who filmed strange videos of themselves hammering off their arms and showing it to the netizens from all angles to prove that their arms were indeed broken. Then, after injecting a tube of medicine, their arms healed not long after. There were no special effects added to the video. The producer of the video also admitted that the medicine that was injected was called regenerative medicine and it cost 2 million federal coins. The almost sky-high price of the medicine and the magical effect instantly aroused the curiosity of the people in North Desert City. Even people from other cities noticed these interesting news. The reputation of regenerative medicine was getting louder and louder. In the company, Dean, Ma Jing and the others as well as the advertising and planning departments had a meeting. They listened to the various results reported by the advertising department. Everyone felt like they were in a dream. Even Ma Jing and the others who were concentrating on studying the medicine felt incomparably magical. They looked at Dean with admiration. Who would have thought that Dean would let the news platform take the initiative to advertise for him? The money invested in the advertisement was small, but it turned into a news event that attracted the attention of some popular news platforms. They pushed the news to their homepage, causing the regenerative medicine to explode in just a few days. Furthermore, the government came out to acknowledge it, announcing the price and purchasing channel, causing the regenerative medicine to become the most popular name in North Desert City. The people who admired Dudian the most were the employees of the advertising department. They came from other companies and had many years of experience in advertising planning. However, they had never thought of such a strange advertising method. However, the results made them dispel all doubt. Fame was everything. The role of advertising was to bring strong popularity. Dudian's copywriting had achieved this. I finally got a firm foothold before they started. Dean was quite satisfied with the development of the company. He just wanted to try it out, but he didn't expect the results to be so fast. In the past few days, the regenerative medicine had been approved and could be sold on the market. He also received some calls from unidentified people who intended to buy his company, but he rejected them all. As for using force, it was very difficult unless they used a shady method to nibble away at his results little by little. With the purchase of a large number of customers, a steady flow of funds was transferred into his account. He took out part of the funds to develop the company's site. He also purchased factories and pharmaceutical robots for mass production. I have 800 million in my hands. Including the new VIP customers, the number of agents has increased to more than 50. Most of them are local tycoons. I have a firm foothold in North Desert City. Dean calculated the harvest of the past few days. although the time was short, but the rapid changes in the past few days. He estimated that the savings of Felix, who was from the Locke Consortium, shouldn't be as much as his. At most, he should have 1 or 200 million. This was an overestimation, although Felix had billions of funds in his hands, but it was from Hosk's company. All the funds were in the accounts and needed to be reported. It was very difficult for a consortium like Locke Consortium to falsify property. So it was difficult to get money, but it wasn't impossible. But in Dean's opinion, getting 1 or 200 million was the best. Beep. The communicator rang. Dean picked it up. Who is it? Hello, Mr. Qin. I'm Zhang Ziqing. I want to. A slightly nervous voice with a bit of guilt came from the other end of the phone. Dean felt that the name was a bit familiar. After a little thought, he remembered that it was the first VIP customer that he had visited. He said in a calm tone, Mr. Zhang, I remember that you have put me on the blacklist. Why are you looking for me? Zhang Ziqing was a bit embarrassed. In the past few days, the name of regeneration medicine had spread throughout the North Desert City. It even appeared in the federal news. Although it was not a household name, it was extremely popular and continued to ferment. Many jokes about regeneration medicine were spreading and getting more and more popular. He heard about it from his daughter and then personally learned about it. Only then did he find out that the person who came to find him was not the liar he thought. Mr. Qin, you must be joking. We didn't even meet at that time. I hope you can forgive me. I did it for a reason. Zhang Ziqing was sincere and ready to complain, but he was interrupted by Dean. Since I have been put on the blacklist, there is no need to talk about it. My time is very precious. I wish Mr. Zhang good health. Dean hung up the communicator. Zhang Ziqing heard the sound of the phone being hung up. His face suddenly turned ugly, and then he snorted, It's just a bottle of medicine. I don't believe I can't buy it. You blocked my ID, right? I'll find someone else to buy it. I have money. How can it be difficult for me? He was so angry that he immediately found his friend's communicator to contact him. After Dean hung up the communicator, he also blocked Zhang Ziqing's communication code. He knew that although he did not sell the medicine to him, the latter would definitely buy it from other channels. It was even possible that he could buy it on the black market. It was not difficult to get things done with money. He picked up the communicator, slowly entered a number, and dialed. Chapter 11-12. A strange male voice came from the other side of the communicator. This is Terrace Foreign Affairs Department. Who are you? My name is Qin Mo, the chairman of the Dream Company. Dean said, The regenerative medicine sold in the market these days is made by our company. Jing Chao was a little surprised. He had also heard about the regenerative medicine that had spread like wildfire in the past few days. He heard that the headquarters had purchased this regenerative medicine and was analyzing its composition. He did not expect that the owner of this popular medicine would take the initiative to contact them. Mr. Qin, what's the matter? Jing Chao didn't mention the regenerative medicine but asked in a calm tone. Dean frowned slightly. He didn't expect the people from the big consortium to be so arrogant. He thought for a moment and said, I want to make an appointment with the person in charge of your consortium. I have a business to discuss with you. Discuss business with us? Jing Chao was stunned for a moment and couldn't help but laugh. Mr. Qin, our Foreign Affairs Department is very busy. If Mr. Qin wants to sell your company's shares, I can inform you. But if you want to talk about the distribution of regenerative medicine, then forget it. Dean slightly raised his eyebrows and was silent for a moment, then said, I want to talk about another kind of medicine. This medicine isn't on the market yet, but the market demand is not inferior to the regenerative medicine. I want to sell this medicine to your consortium. Do you think we can talk about this business face to face? Jing Chao was surprised. Your company has a drug similar to the regenerative medicine? This. Okay, I will convey this matter for you. Dean said, "Thank you," and hung up the communicator. He didn't expect the Terrace Consortium to be more arrogant than he had imagined. It seemed that they were quite dismissive of the regenerative medicine. He was worried that they would come to grab the patent and the pharmaceutical company. Now it seemed that he was worried too much. Terrace Consortium has dominated the Federation for hundreds of years. It is the inheritance of the god of science and technology. Its status has been respected for a long time. Even the ordinary employees are so arrogant. I don't know how arrogant the executives of the consortium are. Hundreds of years of empire will be destroyed by corruption, let alone a mere consortium. Perhaps it has already been covered with scars. Once it is pushed down, it will collapse. Dean's eyes flashed slightly. It didn't take long for Felix to contact him. How is it? Have you contacted the Terrace Consortium? Got in touch, Dudian said. He got the communication number from Felix. Ordinary people wouldn't know the communication number of the foreign minister's office. Felix let out a cry of surprise and then probed. I heard that you were the one who made the regeneration medicine. He should have earned a lot of money, right? Why would he sell such a good thing to Trath? Could it be to protect himself? If you sell this to the Roquefai Financial Group, I'll get my father to step in. I'll definitely be able to buy it. Also, I can use this opportunity to get promoted. When I get promoted, I'll be able to give you more support. Dean interrupted his long speech. You have been dormant for many years. Can't you afford to wait? Now is not the time for you to be promoted. Do you want to enter the eyes of your brother and sister as early as possible and then be targeted by them? How confident are you that you can protect yourself from them? Your father hasn't reached the time to die of old age yet. Wouldn't it be better for you to stand up for him when it's time to pass on his position? Felix smiled bitterly. What you said makes sense. I'm just afraid of accidents. Are you afraid that I will have an accident, or afraid that your father will have an accident? Dean asked. Of course I'm afraid. Felix was halfway through his words when he suddenly whispered, Why do I feel like there's something wrong with your words? Dudian indifferently said, You think too much. I have something to talk to you about. The performance of your Haas company is average. Based on the current situation, I don't know how many years it will take for you to be promoted. I'm going to invest a sum of money in you. About 500 million. Take it and run it well. Felix didn't hear clearly. How much do you want to invest in me? 500 million. Is it too little? Dudian asked. Felix was dumbfounded. Where did you get so much money? He suddenly thought of the regeneration medicine in Dudian's hands. It's only been a few days and you've made so much money by selling regeneration medicine? My God, the total salary I've received from the consortium over the years plus the money I've saved doesn't even reach 500 million. That's the gap between us, Dudian bluntly said. Felix almost vomited blood. How can you talk like that? He took a deep breath and gritted his teeth. I can do a lot of things if you give me 500 million. But there will be risk. Once I succeed, I'll get huge returns. At least I'll be able to enter my father's line of sight. Your goal is to enter your father's line of sight? Dudian was slightly disappointed. Felix heard the disappointment in Dudian's tone and quickly said, It's just the first step to replace him. It's a necessary step. Dudian thought for a moment but didn't say anything. He was afraid that the goal would be too big and scare him away. He immediately said, I'll transfer the money to you, but you have to sign a contract for the money. I can't give it to you unconditionally. I knew it, Felix whispered. Dudian made an appointment with Felix to sign the contract and then hung up the communication. In the evening, the secretary of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Terrace Consortium contacted Dudian and arranged to meet him at noon tomorrow. He also sent a plane to pick him up. Dadian rested for the night and sorted out the information. The next morning he came to the company and handed over some simple things to Zhuing. He asked her to take care of the company's operation. Then he left the company by car. It didn't take long for an armed fighter jet painted with the Terrace English logo to land. Several burly bodyguards came out of it. Dadian went to meet them. The one who was in charge of receiving him was a blond middle-aged man who claimed to be the deputy of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Terrace Consortium. After the fighter jet took off, it left the sky above North Desert City. The wilderness outside the city was in sight, and there were even air tunnels leading from North Desert City to other cities. Meanwhile, the fighter jet gradually flew higher and passed through the wilderness, passing by cities along the way. Chapter 11:13. The blond middle-aged man didn't talk much on the way. Dean could see that although his expression was gentle and polite, his eyes were full of arrogance. It was obvious that he didn't really put Dean in his eyes. Dean wanted to ask him about things that the Terrace Consortium couldn't find on the internet. But after seeing his attitude, he knew that it was useless to ask. So he simply ignored him. The journey was exceptionally quiet. 2 hours later, the fighter jet flew in a straight line to one of the 5 main cities of the Federation, Duzhou City. This was the hinterland of the Terrace Financial Group. It could be said that the Terrace Financial Group was the local tyrant in this city. Every shop and piece of land in this city was inextricably linked to the Terrace Financial Group. It was also the headquarters of the Terrace Financial Group. Just like the other 3 main cities of the 5 main cities were also the headquarters of the other 3 consortiums. The most distinguished main city was called Peace City. It was the place where the president of the Federation and the high-ranking officials of the Federation lived. But the prosperity of Peace City was a bit weaker than the main cities occupied by the 4 consortiums. But it didn't affect the lofty image and status of Peace City in the minds of the citizens of the Federation. The fighter plane had the Terrace logo on it, so it was exempt from border check. The sentinels put it into the city's helipad. The blond middle-aged man Nicole and Dean got off the plane. There was already a top-brand car made by a subsidiary of Terrace waiting outside the plane. Nicole and Dean got on the car and went to the Foreign Affairs office building of the Terrace Consortium. It was located on the famous Half Moon River. The employees of the building could sit in the office and see the winding clear Half Moon River outside the building. It was one of the most expensive places in the city. "Please." Nicole got off the car and politely said to Dean. Dean looked at the towering building in front of him and the huge green area surrounding the building. He couldn't help but feel the powerful financial resources of the Terrace Consortium. Just a Foreign Affairs office building was so imposing. No wonder the headquarters of the consortium was built on the island in the middle of the city. After a while, Dean arrived at the office of the Minister of Foreign Affairs. But the minister was in a meeting at the moment, so he had to wait for the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Dadian was the only one in the big office. There was a young and beautiful secretary in front of him. There was a cup of coffee in front of him. He looked out of the floor-to-ceiling window in front of him. He could see the distant Half Moon River. There were countless short buildings and pedestrians walking on the street. They were as small as ants. From here he could overlook everything. It seemed that he could control everything. Dean casually turned his head and looked through the wall. He found that the material inside the wall was more special, like metal and wood. Obviously, it was difficult to build such a high-rise building with hundreds of floors with ordinary construction technique. He saw other offices on this floor, including Nichols. The sign on the desk and the door showed that he was a secretary. In another conference room, Dean saw the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yan Changze. He had a Chinese face and was about 50 years old. He had an extraordinary temperament. He was telling others about a commercial lawsuit between the Terrace Consortium and the Michael Consortium's Joan Group. Dean's eyes penetrated the man's body. He found that the man's bone density was relatively high. His physique was about 3 times that of an ordinary person. In the Federation, such a physique could be regarded as a Special Forces soldier. I didn't expect that a Minister of Foreign Affairs like Terrace would have such a physique. I didn't expect that a Minister of Foreign Affairs like Terrace would have such a physique. It should be the result of taking drugs. I heard that the Terrace Consortium studied undeads and monsters. Some of the banned drugs didn't circulate on the market. Even ordinary citizens didn't know about the existence of these banned drugs. But it wasn't a secret to the military and other consortia. He should have been injected with Terrace biological drug, TK-27, Dudian thought in his heart. This drug was sold to the military and was one of the sources of Terrace financial resources. The price was extremely expensive. It was said that it was 10 million per unit. In comparison, his regeneration drug was a cheap product. Felix said that this drug is classified as a banned drug. It's not sold to ordinary people because they are afraid that ordinary people's physique is too high. It's easy to cause chaos. If they kill in anger, it's likely that there will be a large number of casualties before the police arrive. In the old society, it's indeed possible. But the Federation is surrounded by foreign enemies, and there are monsters lurking around. Such a promising drug isn't available to the people. Dean was slightly disappointed because he didn't see any hidden diseases in Yen Chang's body. If Yen Chang's had an incurable disease, Dean might be able to use the treatment opportunity to win him over. But Yen Chang's had been in a high position for a long time. Obviously, he had taken good care of himself. Even if he had some minor diseases, he would be cured. While Dean was thinking, Yen Chang's meeting was over. The secretary at the door reminded him to return to the office. As soon as he entered the door, he saw Dean sitting on the sofa drinking coffee. Yen Chang's expression didn't change in the slightest. He sat down at his desk and asked the secretary to pour a cup of tea. Then he said to Dean, "Mr. Chen Mo? I heard that you have a business to discuss with us?" Dean felt the arrogance in his bones. He smiled and said, "Since Minister Yen has heard of me, I'll be straightforward. I have a drug in my hands that is better than regenerative medicine. Once it is launched into the market, it will inevitably cause a sensation. It can cure many difficult and miscellaneous diseases in the market. I'm willing to sell this drug to you. I don't know if you are willing to accept it." Yen Chang's expression didn't change at all. He smiled faintly and said, "Mr. Chen Mo, from the looks of it, you're only in your early 20s this year. You're really young and promising. Whether the medicine you mentioned is good or not, we still need our experts to judge it. I wonder what price Mr. Chen would like to sell it for?" Dean said, "Not much. 1 billion in cash and an opportunity to enter Randy Company to study." Yen Chang's slightly raised his eyebrows. 1 billion in cash? Mr. Chen really knows how to joke. Even if it turns out to be as useful as you said, it's not worth 1 billion. Moreover, this Randy Company is a pharmaceutical company of our Terrace Consortium. It's really questionable whether Mr. Chen is going there to study or for other purposes. I didn't expect the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Terrace Consortium to be such a stingy person. Dean smiled and said, "My regenerative medicine has been launched for a few days and I've already made 800 million. To put it bluntly, the market value of regenerative medicine is 10 billion or even higher. 1 billion is just a fraction. Do you think it's too much? Do you really think I'm a poor student who doesn't know anything?" Yen Chang's face darkened slightly. He didn't expect Dean to suddenly turn hostile, but he was indeed hit by Dean's words. He was even more surprised that the regeneration medicine had earned 800 million for Dean. This speed of making money was too amazing. His face quickly changed, and he smiled and said, "Mr. Chen, you must be joking. If your medicine is really as you said, we can talk, but we need to verify the medicine you said first. Otherwise, it's useless to talk, isn't it? Dean took out a small bottle and said, "This medicine is called hemoxilin. It can treat deformities and mental disorders. It's also very effective in the treatment of cancer. I've investigated it. The cost of treating cancer is 5 times lower than the cost of treating cancer on the market. It will become a drug that will monopolize the market." Yen Chang's eyes slightly lit up. He had never heard of such a thing. He immediately said, "I'll immediately contact the experts and let them come over to test the medicine. Let's sign the contract first. In addition, I've recorded everything we said on the video." Dean raised the communicator and said. Yen Chang's face slightly changed. He coldly said, "Mr. Qin is very cautious. I'm only guarding against villains, not gentlemen." "What do you think?" Dean indifferently said. Chapter 11:14. Did the Randy Company agree? Dean was startled. He couldn't help but be shocked. Thinking of the communication he had just picked up, he immediately asked, "Who was looking for you? You haven't reported to the Randy Company yet. How could they agree? Did they already know that I would come here and make such a request?" Yen Changza saw Dean's shocked look, and felt that the horror in his heart had faded a lot. He calmly said, "The news came from the headquarters. As for how they know, it is estimated that you leaked it before. Our Terrace Consortium's intelligence network is spread all over the Federation. As long as we want to know, nothing can be hidden from us. But Mr. Qin, it seems that the consortium is very optimistic about Mr. Qin. I hope Mr. Qin won't let the consortium down." The Secretary General of the headquarters personally called? Dean's face slightly changed. He felt that things were a bit strange and out of his control. Yen Changza was shocked that the headquarters would pay attention to a small character like him. But he was shocked because how did they know that he would go to the Randy Company to study? He had never told anyone about this matter. He only thought about it in his heart. Could others guess his thoughts? But he hadn't seen the Secretary General of the headquarters. Even if he had the magic mark ability, he couldn't read other people's thoughts. Was it inferred from his behavior? If so, his every move was under the surveillance of the Terrace Consortium. The person who speculated his behavior was also a terrible person. These thoughts flashed through Dean's mind. His eyes were dignified. He thought for a little bit and decided to go. If the Terrace Consortium was malicious to him, it would be easy to catch him with the power they had shown. It was better to take the initiative to go and see what they were planning. "When can I go?" Dean asked. Yen Changza said, "Since the headquarters called, they should have already said hello to the Randy Company. You can go directly to the headquarters of the Randy Company to report." "But, my medicine hasn't been tested yet." "No need to test. Mr. Qin, take it directly to the Randy Company and give it to the experts there." Yen Changza smiled politely. Dean's heart sank as he nodded slightly. He put away the bottle and left the office. Secretary Nick was at the door leading him to take the elevator and leave the majestic office building. "They haven't even verified the medicine, but they've already agreed to my request. This means that they already knew that I would make this request. Moreover, regardless of whether the medicine is real or fake, they are willing to let me go." Dean felt as if there was a pair of cold eyes behind him, watching his every move. The owner of this pair of eyes seemed to want to see him. In that case, he would go and see. Dean called a car from the roadside and went to the Randy Pharmaceutical Company headquarters in Duyo City. They showed an extraordinary intelligence network and didn't hide anything. "It seems that they are sure that I will go." Dean sat in the car and looked at the scenery outside the window. His eyes were calm as he thought about the pros and cons of the matter. The possibility of the other party being malicious was not big. The reason why they found him should not be because of his pharmaceutical ability, but because of his identity as a demon. In addition, He couldn't think of anything else that was worth the attention of the Terrace Consortium. Felix, I'm going to the Randy Pharmaceutical Conglomerate's headquarters. They took the initiative to invite me there, and I suspect that they have ulterior motives. If there are any accidents, immediately spread the news that the Randy Pharmaceutical Conglomerate is secretly hiding monsters and make a big commotion. Dean used the communicator to contact Felix. Although he felt that the Randy Company shouldn't be malicious, otherwise he could directly arrest them. But who could be sure that they didn't deliberately make him think so? Perhaps they wanted to lure him into the trap. They were worried that he would counterattack and minimize the casualties. So, he still had to be prepared. Is it the Randy Company of the Terrace Consortium? Felix was shocked. What are you going to do there? Since you know that their purpose is not pure, why do you still want to go? I suspect that they know my identity as a demon, Dean said in a deep voice. Felix was stunned. How is it possible? I didn't tell anyone. If they know your identity, then what are you going to do? Run. It's useless to run. Dean shook his head. The other party's intelligence network knew his identity as a demon. If he wanted to escape, then he wouldn't be able to leave Dujan City before he was caught. If something happens to you, don't confess to me. If I go in, then no one will bail you out, Felix suddenly said. There was a bit of tension in his voice. Dean indifferently said, I know, but if you don't find a way to get me out, then you can come in and accompany me. Felix gritted his teeth. I'll definitely find a way, but you have to give me time. I'll arrive at the Randy Company in 2 hours. If there's no problem, I'll contact you in an hour. Dean said, If I don't contact you, then it means that something happened to me. You have to find a way to get me out within 48 hours. If something happens, I'm afraid I won't live for 48 hours. Too tight, time is too tight. Felix couldn't help but say. That's it. Dean hung up the communicator. He didn't continue to wrangle with him. Terrace Consortium, the head of the 4 consortiums. It has hundreds of years of heritage, and was founded in the hands of the god of science and technology. Dean slightly narrowed his eyes. Among the 4 consortiums, the Terrace Consortium stood aloof from worldly affairs. However, most of the technological products in the Federation came from the Terrace Consortium. The foundation of this consortium was so powerful that Locke, Milan, and Michael consortiums were deeply afraid of it. This was also the reason why Locke Consortium was eager for quick success in developing the monster mecha. It was normal for there to be gaps between consortiums, but if the gap was too big, it would make people feel fear and uneasiness. Obviously, the other 3 consortiums were afraid of the bottomless foundation of the Terrace Consortium. They were worried that one day they would be swallowed up. There's only one possibility that they know my identity as a demon. It's the demon attack in North Desert City. Dean narrowed his eyes. With the level of detail of their investigation, they should have arrested me and interrogated me. However, they didn't. Instead, they pushed out a few followers to attack the Church of God. It seems that they had noticed me a long time ago, but they didn't beat the grass to scare the snake. Since the Terrace Consortium knows about this, it means that North Desert City is also a secret force of the Terrace Consortium. General Yao Jie, who was responsible for the investigation, has a high position in the Federation. I didn't expect him to be a member of the Terrace Consortium. Dean took a deep breath and put his hand on his heart. Perhaps a fierce battle was imminent, or perhaps it was just a false alarm. He could only hope that it would be a good result. 2 hours passed quickly. Dean came to the entrance of the Terrace Company. The headquarters of the Terrace Company was more majestic than the previous Foreign Affairs building. The surrounding environment was extremely green, spacious and clean. There was a huge statue in front of the company. It was the god of science and technology of the Federation. Dean looked up and felt that the latter was looking down at him. There was a mysterious smile on his face. Dean took a deep breath and went in. He showed his identity card in the hall. Soon, a woman in a business suit trotted over. She looked at Dean and said, "Mr. Cheen, the headquarters has arranged for you to come to our R&D department. Please come with me." Dean was startled. He slightly restrained his strength and nodded. "Please." The woman in business attire led the way in the front. They took the elevator and went to the vast factory building behind the Randy Company. They passed through 4 or 5 buildings in a row before stopping. "This is the R&D department of the Terrace Company. There are famous scientific academicians here." The woman in business suit couldn't hide the respect and pride on her face. She introduced Dean and took him to the registration office of the R&D building. "It seems that they really want me to come to study?" Dean was surprised. He felt that he couldn't understand the Terrace Consortium. The woman in front of him was not a disguise. 9 out of 10 of her words were true. How could the Terrace Consortium dare to let him come to the place where the valuable scientific academicians worked? Weren't they afraid of being killed by him? "Don't they know my identity as a demon?" Dean was suspicious. "Just because of the regenerative medicine, they put me in such a high position." Chapter 11:15. Hearing the woman's words, the woman's eyes widened. She turned to look at the young Dean with astonishment. It must be known that many famous academicians had developed a lot of drugs for the company, but none of them were able to get the highest authority. At most, they were only able to get the first level of authority. And the highest authority was only available to the legal representative of the company and the existence of the consortium. Even the directors of the consortium couldn't touch it. Dean's eyes moved, and his mood that had just calmed down suddenly tightened. Although he didn't know the management system of the Randy Company, but the highest authority should not be casually given. Did a regenerative drug really have such a great charm? Moreover, the Randy Company actually allowed him to participate in all the drug experiments of their company. This was simply a little too much. "Millie, are you sure?" The woman in the business suit put away the shock on her face, and couldn't help but ask. Millie shook her head and said, "It's recorded in the system. There's no mistake, unless our system is hacked. But there should be no one in the entire Federation who can hack into our system." The woman in the business suit was startled. She thought that the people who were good at network technology in the Federation were all in the Terrace Consortium, who could hack into the system of their company. But if the system was right, did the consortium really put so much hope on this young man? Dean heard the words of the two and came back to his senses. He asked, "Can I participate in all the experiments? What if the experiment fails because of my participation?" Millie respectfully said, "Mr. Cheen, you have the highest authority and are eligible to participate in all the experimental projects. As for destroying the experiment, I don't know. But your status is currently the same as our company's chairman. Only the board of directors of the consortium can revoke your status." Dean nodded slightly, but his mood was somewhat heavy. He couldn't guess the thoughts of the Terrace Consortium. But there must be something fishy about the abnormality. He could only take one step at a time and figure out the situation first. "Then, Miss Millie, please introduce me to your company," Dean said after thinking for a moment. Millie nodded gladly. The woman in business attire saw that Dean was not found, and could not help but feel sorry. Although she did not know why this young man was so appreciated by the consortium, but it was certainly right to curry favor with such a person. Unfortunately, she had missed this opportunity. Under Millie's detailed introduction, Dean had a general understanding of the composition of Randy Company. He estimated that almost an hour had passed. He interrupted Millie's explanation and went to the corner to contact Felix. "Are you all right?" "That's great." The communicator quickly connected, and Felix's relieved voice could be heard. Dean said, "Nothing for the time being." Felix smiled and said, "It seems that you were too paranoid before. Since there's nothing else, I'll be busy." "Wait," Dean said, I'll contact you again in 2 hours. If I don't contact you, then continue with the original plan. Felix was stunned. Is that really necessary? It's necessary. Dean hung up the communication. Dean went back to Millie and listened to her introduction of the scientific academicians of Randy Company. After listening to them one by one, he took his staff card from her hand and went to the elevator. He scanned the staff card and went up to the laboratory floor above the high-rise building. When the elevator door opened, Dean saw many people in white coats and isolation suits shuttling through the corridor. Dean avoided the surveillance cameras and used his X-ray vision to scan the entire floor. He saw that there were 5 huge laboratories, and in each laboratory there were 2 or 3 to 5 academicians in white coat. They were dressed like doctors. In one of the laboratories, 4 academicians were dressed even more exaggeratedly. They were fully armed and wearing gas masks. The laboratory door was a double spiral metal door that was tightly sealed. Dean estimated that even with his own strength, he would need to punch hard to open the door. So many drugs. Dean saw the shelves in the laboratories were full of glass bottles. All of them were medicines produced by Randy Company. Some of them were widely circulated in the market. The academicians inside seemed to be studying how to improve them. The rich research atmosphere permeated the entire floor, making people want to participate in it. Of course, this referred to the people who were also obsessed with pharmaceutics. Dean praised the management of Randy Company in his heart, then turned into the elevator and continued to go up. Every time he came out to observe for a moment until he came to the top laboratory. Only the academicians with Level 1 authority could enter here. Even if other people wanted to come in, the staff card was not set enough authority, so the elevator couldn't go up. There were only 3 laboratories on this floor. The area was more spacious. 2 of the laboratories were empty. Only 1 laboratory was in operation. There were 3 older academicians, 2 men and 1 woman. One of them was an old man with blonde hair and deep cheeks. It could be seen that he was young and elegant. The other one had gray hair and a Chinese face. There was a woman in her 40s who also had a Chinese face. She had a quiet and elegant, mature temperament. Dean glanced at them and was attracted by the situation in the laboratory. His eyes flashed a chill. He saw 2 metal crosses in the laboratory, tied to 2 slightly mutated walking corpses. At first glance, it was not long since they were infected from humans to walking corpses. Their skin still retained human skin color, and they wore simple uniforms of the Randy Company. Are these experimental mice cultivated by Randy Company? Dean looked at the 2 undead. A man and a woman. Both were very young. At the moment, their faces were ferocious. They were roaring at the 3 academicians who were talking. The other experiments on the lower floors were using mice. They were also studying the drugs that were circulating in the federal market. Only in this way, the pain of the Federation couldn't be exposed. Although he was mentally prepared, he still couldn't help but sigh when he saw the other side of this conscientious enterprise that was highly praised by the citizens of the Federation and respected by countless people. But soon, Dean cheered up and felt a trace of excitement. Felix was right. The Terrace Consortium was really studying the undeads and trying to crack the secrets of the undead. I came to the right place. Dean was happy. He carefully looked at the instruments in the laboratory. He had never seen these instruments before. He couldn't even find them on the market. He couldn't even identify the effect. The next moment, Dean's mind suddenly became alert. Randy Company raised his authority to the highest level. Was it to let him participate in the undead's experiment? Weren't they afraid that he would be scared and the news would spread? Unless they knew that he was a demon, they would never be scared by such a small thing. As expected, they knew his identity. Chapter 11:16. Ding, Duddian swiped his card at the door. The metal spiral door of the laboratory opened. The 3 people inside were surprised by the sudden opening of the door. They turned around and saw a strange face. "Who are you?" The quiet woman frowned and asked softly. Dudian smiled. "My name is Chinemo. I have just arrived at your company. I came to see the experiment. Are you studying the undeads?" Chinemo? The blond old man frowned. He didn't remember the name. He noticed that Dudian could open the door of the laboratory. He asked, "Do you have level 1 authority?" Dudian smiled. "The consortium has given me the highest authority. They allow me to participate in all the experiments of the company." Highest authority? The three were shocked. They had been in the company for many years and had made countless contributions, but they were only given level 1 authority. As far as they knew, the highest authority of the company was basically not granted to the employees. "Were you sent by the consortium?" Another white-haired old man frowned. Dean smiled and said, "I'm just here to study. Please forgive me if I disturb the three of you." The white-haired old man saw that Dudian avoided his question, so he didn't continue to ask. He was slightly dissatisfied in his heart. The consortium had promoted such a young junior to the highest authority of the company. What was the significance of them who had dedicated their lives to the company? However, he had seen too many people who relied on their background to reach high positions. Although there was dissatisfaction in his heart, he didn't show it. He just nodded to Dudian and continued to look at the experimental data in his hand. "Chinemo? To be on the safe side, I have to verify your identity." The quiet and mature woman smiled sweetly. "My name is Chu Huiru. I'm a bioinformatics expert." "Hello." Dudian nodded and handed over his employee card to her for scanning. Chu Huiru was startled for a moment as she saw the results of the scan. She sighed in her heart, but her face was gentle as usual. She returned the employee card to Dudian. "Mr. Chinemo is really young and promising. I hope that we will have a pleasant cooperation in the future. All three of you are my seniors. I hope that the seniors will be generous in teaching me." Dudian laughed. The three of them saw that his attitude was humble and his tone was sincere. The dissatisfaction in their hearts gradually faded and their attitudes became much more relaxed. They each introduced themselves. The golden-haired old man was called Sovas, and the white-haired old man was called Chien-Yi. "Master Chien-Yi, do you want to study the medicine to cure the undead?" Dean casually asked after a few words of greeting. Chien-Yi shook his head and smiled. "Of course not. There hasn't been any significant progress in the medicine for the treatment of the undead for so many years. The company's research funding in this area has also been reduced. Now, no one is doing this kind of useless research. We are extracting the virus from the corpse and decomposing it. We hope to extract the cyclic fission gene from the corpse virus." Cyclic division gene. Dean was curious. Chien-Yi smiled and said, "This is a conjecture put forward by an expert 20 years ago from the research of the undead. Unfortunately, he has passed away. In recent years, the conjecture of the cyclic splitting gene has been confirmed. It seems to really exist. In our research, we have also found some clues. If we can really extract it, it will have a great effect. It can increase the lifespan of ordinary people, and it is even possible to achieve immortality." Immortality? Dean was surprised. Is there life in this world that can be immortal? Not in the past, but it is hard to say in the future. Chien-Yi revealed a mysterious smile. Chu Huiru looked serious. Even if it can't make people immortal, but it can greatly increase their lifespan. Living for 400 or 500 years isn't a problem. Think about it. If everyone's lifespan can be greatly increased, then the butterfly effect will be very strong. A person who has lived for 500 years will have a profound knowledge. Coupled with the reproductive power of human beings, the territory will expand more than 10 times. Maybe we can reclaim the position of the Earth's hegemon. Dean nodded. Even if the lifespan doubled, the butterfly effect would be unimaginably terrible. But how could there be such a thing in the undead virus? He thought of the body structure of the ice worm, the immortal cells, and the infinite division of metamorphosis. The virus appeared after the invasion of the Earth by the magic worms. Now it seemed that it was very likely that the virus was put on the Earth by the magic worms. These undead are infected. Is there no way to restore them to human form? Dean asked the three. Sawa shook his head and said, once a zombie is completely infected, it's basically hopeless. The cells and memory carriers in the brain have all been torn apart by the mutation caused by the virus. Even if the body can be restored to human form, the brain can't be restored. The human brain is the most complicated machine, and with the current technology, it's impossible to completely repair a damaged brain. Dean's heart was cold. He felt as if a thorn was piercing his heart. But he still asked, is there no way? There are so many infected people. If we can cure them, then the value is not greater than the creation of the immortality medicine. Qian chuckled. How can it be compared? If there is an immortality medicine, then the value is incomparable. What is more attractive than immortality in this world? Those who were infected were just ordinary people. Even if a cure could be developed, who would buy it? Do their relatives have so much money to buy the medicine? If there is, then they won't let their relatives leave the city and get infected. Dean was startled. He felt as if his heart was squeezed and squeezed by a hand. Qian Yi's words caused his brain to heat up, and he even wanted to tear the three of them apart. However, his rationality made his body stand like a nail on the spot. Perhaps he should have seen through this earlier. The big shots wanted to live forever and continue to enjoy life. Ordinary people only wanted to save their lives. However, the big shots controlled most of the resources. It was destined that the resources would tilt according to their wishes. Even if there was a medicine that was suitable for ordinary people, it was only because the market demand was large and they could fill their pockets. So, the company is no longer doing research in this area? Dean was silent for a long time, then slowly opened his mouth. Chu Huiru was keenly aware of the fluctuations in the young man's aura. She immediately said, it's not that the company is not doing research in this area, but no one is willing to do it. Not to mention the difficulty, the funding is small. If the research fails, they will be criticized. Unless there is 70% or 80% certainty, then it is just asking for trouble. Dean exhaled and said, I know. Can I participate in this experiment? I will only observe. I won't affect you. The three looked at each other. But thinking that Dean had the highest authority, they could not refuse. Qian nodded. Okay, you are still young. It is good to watch. Thank you, Master Qian. Dean thanked. Chapter 11:17. Dean watched from the side and didn't disturb them. He casually went to the other side of the laboratory. There was a row of metal cabinets. It looked like the ones in the morgue. Dean opened one of the cabinet. There was a pale girl lying inside. Her lips were pale. She didn't have any clothes on her body. Her body was clean and there was no wound. Dean looked at the cabinet and pushed it back. He opened the cabinet next to it. There was a baby inside. It looked like a ceramic sculpture. It was quietly lying inside. There was no breath. Chin-mo, what are you doing? Chu Huiru noticed Dudian and asked in a soft voice. Dean turned around and smiled. Nothing. I'm just looking around. Did I disturb you? Shaking her head, Chu Huiru replied, those in the freezers are our test subjects. Most of them died of diseases, and their families donated them to us. We're using their bodies for research, and I hope that we can gain something from it. Dean smiled. If we can use their bodies to develop medicines that will benefit society, then it can be considered as accumulating merits for them. Chu Huiru smiled. This is also something we have to work hard on. At this time, Qian Yi and Sora seemed to be talking about a contradiction. They immediately pulled Chu Huiru over. Dean strolled to the metal shelf next to the freezer. There were many bottles and jars on it. They were of different sizes. They were labeled with letters. There was no name or record of the effect. Qian Yi and Soras were able to identify what was inside from the labels. He picked up the bottles and glanced at them. Then he went to the other side of the laboratory. There was a row of bookshelves. There were a lot of documents on them. He took out 2 of them and looked at them. One was the genetic data of coiled tiger beast. The other one was the investigation report of melanosis. He quickly flipped through it, and with his extraordinary memory, he memorized the knowledge inside. Although he didn't understand some things, he could slowly learn them in the future. After reading 7 or 8 documents in a row, he deeply felt the advanced technology of the Federation. There were many things that he had never heard of, and he couldn't understand them at all. Even if he learned all the knowledge in the superchip, he would only barely be able to deduce 1 or 2 of them. There was no end to learning. Dean sighed in his heart. At the same time he was excited. This was a good thing for him. Chu Huiru paid attention to Dean from time to time as she discussed with Qian Yi and Sol. She saw that Dean was casually flipping through the experimental materials. It seemed that he was just putting on an act. After a few glances, she no longer paid attention to it. Undead limb replacement surgery. Dean suddenly pulled out a thick document. After opening it, he saw the title of these words. His eyes were slightly bright and he quickly flipped down. This document recorded an operation. The experimenter had a whimsical idea. He put together the body tissues of different undeads, hoping to find out the secrets of the undead's body. From the results of the experiment, the arm and thigh of different undeads were swapped, but there was no effect. Under the delicate surgical stitching of the experimenter, an undead body could be embedded with 4 or 5 other undead arms. When attacking, each undead arm could actually move. The neural existence of undead. Dean saw the conclusions and speculations of the experimenter. He felt that the harvest was not shallow. He had never thought of using this method to study undead before. He did not expect that the limbs of undead would not reject each other, and could even reconnect the severed limbs. Soon, the document was finished. Dean did not linger. He inserted it back and continued to pull out another one to continue to read. Time passed quickly. In the laboratory, in addition to the sound of Dean flipping through the papers, there was the sound of Chu Huiru and the other 2 discussing the experiment. From time to time, they dissected and mobilized the electronic beat. Conditioned reflex training method. Dean saw the method of using conditioned reflex to train the undead in one of the documents. He could not help but feel a little strange. He had to say that there were many smart people in the world. The wisdom of the Federation had accumulated for hundreds of years. They had already studied the undead from various aspects, including the previous undead limb replacement surgery. He also saw a related conjecture from another document. That was to put multiple undead together to create a stronger undead. Then use conditioned reflex to train the undead legion. It was also mentioned in this document that when the undead evolved to a certain extent, the mutated brain tissue would extend a new consciousness. This consciousness could be said to be instinct, and there may be a situation of dream return. The so-called dream return was that the residual memory fragments in the mutated brain of the undead were preserved, and may be integrated into the new consciousness and instinct. Simply put, it was the birth of a consciousness with a few fragments of memories, but this consciousness was dominated by the instinct of the undead, bloodthirsty, killing. Some undead, after the birth of consciousness, even opened their mouth to speak simple words, but there was no moral judgment, no concept of life and death, and the temptation of blood was irresistible. Even if it was the closest person, they would bite to death. The experimenter used a well-cultivated child undead to do the experiment. The child undead could spit out simple words after the birth of consciousness, and even giggled. The experimenter found her close relatives and tried to awaken her memory and restore her humanity. but the child rushed to her mother. Although trapped in a cage, her face was bloodthirsty, and she was even calling for her mother. Many experiments have shown that the undeads with consciousness are more difficult to control than the undeads with pure instincts. The broken memories will not give them human morality, but will let them grow slowly, become treacherous, learn to disguise, and even use simple strategies. Dean thought of the corpse king that had bitten Aisha. He would never forget the battle that day. The treachery shown by the corpse king was still vivid in his mind. Obviously, it was a corpse king that had been born for a long time. Honed in the wilderness, it had long become treacherous and insidious. The undead's consciousness is generally at rank 7, about 1,000th is at rank 6, and about 6% is at rank 8. The statistics on the data were very complete. Dean compared it with the army. The rank 7 was about the pioneer. Using the limbs of the high-level undead, sowing the brain of the low-level undead, and training with conditioned reflex to cultivate the high-level undead legion. Dean looked at the expected results on the data and soon felt a chill. The Federation may have already implemented this. In addition to the mecha, they also have a group of high-level undead legion who are not afraid of death. Chapter 11:18. It is indeed the fastest way to enhance strength by using the simple violence of the undeads and the unified cultivation of the conditioned reflex. Dean felt that he would use this method in the future. If he wanted to overthrow the behemoths like the Federation and the Empire, this was definitely the best way to arm his forces quickly. There was no other way. Dudian was about to continue reading when Chu Huiru suddenly came over and smiled. "Chin Mo, it's getting late. Let's go for dinner." Dudian turned around and saw that the three of them had taken off their gloves and untied their antibacterial coat. It seemed that they were ready to get off work. He put the book back and nodded. "Okay." They left the laboratory together and locked the metal door. This kind of lock wasn't like the previous one. It required 3 people's fingerprints and irises to open it. Otherwise, even Dudian with the highest authority wouldn't be able to open the door. Of course, there was another way, which was to activate the emergency security system. But the entire building would be aware of it and the alarm would ring. The three of them talked about the next direction of the experiment as they walked. Most of them were using technical terms which Dudian couldn't understand. The scientific and technological system of the Federation wasn't at the level of the old era. In addition to the elements table, many new particles and experimental methods had been replaced with new terms. It would take a specialized system to learn about them. "Chin Mo, you don't seem to be afraid of the undeads?" Chu Huiru asked Dudian after she finished talking to Chien Yi. Chien Yi and Saul remembered that Dudian had turned a blind eye to the undeads in the laboratory. "Aren't they locked? What's there to be afraid of?" Dudian faintly smiled at the careful woman. "They should be afraid of us. After all, they are just experimental materials in our hands. They have the same status as white mice." Chu Huiru was a little surprised. She smiled and said, "You really have a thick nerve." Chien Yi laughed. "It's a good thing to be bold. Chin Mo has a bright future. His achievements may surpass us in the future." Dudian modestly replied. It didn't take long for them to take the elevator to the restaurant of the building. The restaurant was located in the middle of the building. Melodious and soft piano music floated into their ears as the elevator door opened. The decoration of the hall was mild. It wasn't bright or dazzling. It was very quiet. There were only a few people eating in the hall. The 4 of them found a place to sit down. Immediately a waiter came forward to inquire. The 3 of them ate here every day, so they quickly reported the food and juice they wanted. Dean didn't care about this, so he ordered a steak and a hot drink. After ordering, Chien Yi smiled at Dudian. "Mr. Dean, I see that you don't reject the undeads. Do you want to do related research in the future?" The Terrace Consortium focused on the research of walking corpses, but they also conducted research in other areas. Even the Randy Pharmaceutical Company would not only use walking corpses as experimental subjects, but they would also choose various magical creatures as experimental subjects. Some of the magical creatures contained special antibiotics or vaccines, and many of them were beneficial to humans, as they could strengthen the human body's immunity. Dudian knew that Qian Yi and Chu Huiru were experts in the field of undead. They were experts in this field. Asking them to study monsters was tantamount to changing their profession. Qian Yi said so because he wanted to win him over to join his group. Dudian immediately took the opportunity to say, "I didn't think too much about the future. I'm very interested in undeads and monsters. Today I read a lot of information, although I didn't understand a lot of it, but it seems that undeads are more interesting." Qian Yi's eyes lit up. "Oh? Interesting? I saw a piece of information that said undeads can use the limbs of other undead. I think that the world is full of monsters, but the number of undeads can't be ignored. Moreover, I think undeads are more important than monsters," Dudian said in a serious tone. Qian Yi's eyes lit up even more. Saul, who was next to him, showed a curious look. "What do you mean by more important?" "Many aspects," Dudian said. "I think that if humans want to recapture the Earth, then perhaps we can completely crack the secrets of undeads. Then we can achieve this ideal." Chu Huiru looked at him, her eyes showing a bit of brilliance. "What do you mean?" she asked. Dudian looked into the woman's eyes. "I don't know the root cause of the destruction of the old era. But the monsters and the undeads are the mutated beasts of the old era. Although there are many of them, but their intelligence is generally low. They can't unite, so we can ignore them for the time being. But the undeads are different. They are the people of the old era or adventurers who have been out for hundreds of years. They were infected and mutated by the virus. If we can restore their memories and sanity, then we can imagine that the number of humans will increase by more than 10 times. Or even dozens or hundreds of times. There is strength in numbers. If the number of humans increases by 100 times, then why should we be afraid of the monsters? Even if we have to fight, we can afford it." Qian Yi and the other two looked at each other in blank dismay. They didn't expect Dean's thoughts to be so broad. He was actually thinking about the future of the entire human race. Such a mind and vision made the three surprised, but also a bit ashamed. They only considered the particularity of the undead. It was more mysterious than the monsters. The research potential was greater, the harvest was more, the value was more, and it could benefit human beings. But they never thought that the impact of this experiment on the entire human race would be to help humans recapture the Earth and return to the position of the hegemon. Qian Yi sighed and said, "Qin Mo, you are very far-sighted. Even I haven't thought about this. But this idea is good, but it is impossible to do it." He sighed and said, "Let the undeads restore their memories and turn back into humans. Such experiments have been researched by consortiums for hundreds of years, but they have all failed. This is irreversible. Just like a dead person, there is no way to resurrect them. Even with the current technology, it is meaningless to restore the heartbeat of the dead and restore the vitality of the body. It can only be a vegetable. Let the living corpse accompany the family and comfort them." Dudian's face was slightly gloomy. He came to Terrace full of hope, but the answer he got was always the same sentence: there was no way. At the moment, his heart was full of anger. He even wanted to smash the table in front of him. Hundreds of years of research, but there was no progress. Are you all good-for-nothings? Are you all trash? But he didn't say this out loud. After a few breaths, he suppressed his anger. He knew that these research experts were all intelligent people, and it was precisely because of this that this matter gave him such a heavy blow. For hundreds of years, countless experts had studied, but there was no answer. Would he be able to do it alone? Although he didn't want to admit it, The probability was so low that it was powerless. He never looked down on himself, nor would he overestimate himself. But, even if the hope was slim, should he give up? If he gave up, who else in this world would fight for this matter? Who else would fight for her? Thinking of her figure wandering in the wilderness like a lonely ghost, Dudyan felt a stab of pain, like a sharp knife stabbing into his heart. That was a hand he could never let go, even if he had to fight for his whole life. If I can live a little longer, if 10 years is not enough, then 100 years. If 100 years is not enough, then a few hundred years. In the next few hundred years, the level of technology may be unimaginable now. At that time, there will definitely be a cure. Dudyan secretly thought, and suddenly felt a burst of hope. He thought that the technology of the old era, from the creation of steam engines to the launch of nuclear bombs, was less than 100 years. Once the technology took off, the speed of development was unimaginable. He believed that there would be more magical technology in the future. Qian-Yi saw that Dudyan was suddenly silent, and seemed to be hit. He comforted him. Don't be discouraged. Although we can't do what you said, but the value of the undead is extremely high. We can dig out more good things to benefit the society. We can't take a big step at once, but we can run step by step. Sooner or later, we will run to the highest position in the world. Dudyan had restored his calmness. He nodded and pretended to think, and then said, I intend to apply to the company to study the undead. Qian-Yi was surprised. So fast? You don't want to participate in our experiment? Dudyan smiled. Of course I want to participate. I want to learn more from the seniors. When I have learned enough, I will do my own research. If there is anything I don't understand, I will ask the three of you. I hope you can teach me. Haha, well said. Qian-Yi laughed. At this time, the waiter brought the dinner of the few people. The few of them chatted as they ate, casually chatting about the experiment and the recent interesting news. After eating, they left and went back to their respective residences. Dudyan told Felix that he was safe, and then he found Millie and asked her to take him to the residence assigned to him by the company. The residence was in the company building, and the environment was no less than a high-end hotel. After taking a bath, Dudyan lay on the soft bed, looking at the brilliant night view outside the floor-to-ceiling window, and then looked at the huge crystal chandelier on the ceiling. In a trance, there was a feeling of returning to the old era. But he knew that this was not the old era. Although it was also a modern world of technology, but the people had changed. Gently sighing, Dudyan closed his eyes and fell asleep comfortably. It had been a long time since he had such a relaxing rest. Dudyan slept until dawn, feeling full of spirit. He got up to wash and went to the restaurant to eat breakfast. He happened to meet Chu Huiru, so he took her table and ate together. You got up so early? Chu Huiru was surprised by Dudyan's diligence. Chapter 11-19. I heard that Mr. Chinemo has created a regenerative medicine. You are really extraordinary to be able to do such a big thing at such a young age. Chu Huiru's tone was soft. Dudyan knew that she went back last night to inquire about his information. Perhaps she also knew that in addition to regenerative medicine, he was just a poor student with no background. He estimated that at the moment she was curious about why he was favored by the consortium and parachuted into the company to get the highest authority. He did not answer her directly. He humbly smiled and pretended to be mysterious. He changed the topic to the weather. Chu Huiru didn't ask directly as she saw that Dudyan didn't know anything. They casually chatted for a while and went to the laboratory with Dudyan after dinner. Dudyan didn't understand the meaning of the Terrace Consortium, but since the other party had given him the highest authority, he could participate in all the experiments at will. He was happy to use this shortcut to understand the many experiments of the Terrace Consortium. He also learned about the secrets of the Federation that ordinary people didn't know. During the day he would watch Qian Yi and Chu Huiru's experiments. Sometimes he would read the materials and learn about them. At night he would return to his residence and contact Felix. He asked him to send people to take care of the Dream Company. Originally he didn't want to mix the Dream Company with Felix. He wanted to use the company as his base in the Federation. In the future he would accept Barton and Noyce to help him. The so-called cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. He had a nest in the Empire and a nest in the Federation. No matter which side of the war in the future, he would be able to get benefit. But the appearance of Terrace had broken his fantasy. Now that his identity had been exposed, Dreamscape Incorporated naturally had no hope of operating under the Federation's nose and hiding a large number of demons. He might as well hand it over to Felix to help him seize power in the Rockfi Financial Group as soon as possible and work for himself in the future. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye. Qian Yi and Chu Huiru's experiment was coming to an end. In the past half a month, Dudian had seen a lot of other experts in addition to observing in their laboratory. He had also visited the laboratory of experts who were studying monsters. Although monsters and undeads were different types of research, but in his view they were all creatures. So it was inevitable that there would be commonalities. The facts proved that his idea was right. There were many references to undead's experiment. Some people even listed some classic cases of undeads in their papers to prove their views and conjectures. It still doesn't work in the laboratory. Chu Huiru's usually calm and elegant face was now wrinkled and full of worry. Beside her, Qian Yi and Salvas had gloomy expressions and didn't say a word. Dean was flipping through the information. He heard their movements. He knew that their experiments for so many days had been declared bankrupt. The 3 of them had tried many aspects but ultimately failed to create longevity medicine. In fact, the experiment had reached a bottleneck a week ago, but the 3 of them were unwilling to give up. They tried every possible way, but in the end, no matter how much they racked their brains and tried everything, they still failed. If the project failed, the 3 people's ratings in the company would also drop. When it dropped to a certain level, they would be fired by the company. Dean quietly put down the experimental data in his hand and left the laboratory. He didn't want the 3 to vent their anger on him. Although they didn't dare to be angry in public, but if they were secretly angry, it would add trouble to him. After leaving the laboratory, Dean went to the restaurant to order food. He saw a gray-haired old woman sitting in the corner. The old woman was wearing an expert's clothes. Her dress was simple, but her temperament was very dignified. She was looking at the bowl of noodles in front of her. "Grandma Lan Xian, what's wrong with you?" Dean immediately went over. Zhang Lanxin recovered from her melancholy. When she saw a handsome young man, she couldn't help but smile. It's Qin Mo. Dean knew that she was from the faction that studied monsters. Seeing that she was a little annoyed, he asked, "Grandma Lan Xian, is there something wrong with the experiment?" Zhang Lanxin was kind to Dean. She shook her head and smiled. "It's nothing. I just miss the children a little." "Miss the children? Lan Xian, did those bastards come to find you again?" At this time, an old but very dignified voice next to her coldly snorted. Dean looked up and saw that it was Kong Ji, Zhang Lanxin's frequent research partner. He couldn't help but be surprised. "Master Kong, someone dares to find trouble with Grandma Lan Xian?" Kong Ji recognized Dean and knew that he had a big background. His attitude towards him was relatively calm. He didn't treat him as a junior. He coldly snorted. "They are a group of damn things. I say we shouldn't care about these scumbags. It's best to let them fend for themselves." "You can't say that. They are innocent." Zhang Lanxin's soft face slightly stiffened. She seemed to be a little angry. Kong Ji seemed to be a little afraid. He turned to Dean and said, "You don't know. Your Grandma Lan Xian likes to do good deeds. She is overflowing with love. Unfortunately, in this world, good people don't get good rewards. Your grandma has been doing research in the company for many years. All the money she earned was donated to the poor areas of the outer city to treat cancer and nuclear radiation infection. It was a good thing. But who knew that 2 of her experiments had failed? She had no money in her hands. Those who were helped by her found her and asked her to pay for the follow-up treatment. You see, she lives in the company. She has no money. How can she pay for their treatment? The result is that these bastards are blocking the company's door every day. It's as if she owes them money. Dean was dumbfounded. He didn't expect it to be such a small matter. Kongji turned to Zhang Lanxin. You can borrow money from me for other things. But if you want to donate to these heartless bastards, I will never agree. Zhang Lanxin wanted to say something but stopped. She sighed. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. Dean was speechless. Although he saw that the grandma was kind-hearted, he didn't think that she would be good to this point. He shook his head. It's not your fault. I will help you solve this matter. You don't have to worry about it. Zhang Lanxin was startled. Are you willing to lend me money? Dean asked. Are you willing to continue to fill the gaps of these vampires? Zhang Lanxin sighed. Their loved ones are in the ward. They are anxious for money. Kongji was about to get angry when Dean interrupted. There are too many people like this in the world. Grandma, how much can you help? Yes. Kongji immediately shouted. Zhang Lanxin hesitated for a moment. If you are willing to lend me money and help them, I won't do such things again. Dean saw that she seemed to wake up. He was relieved and said, No problem. Leave it to me this time. Kongji snorted and turned his head. Chapter 11:20. After Dean promised Zhang Lanxin, he didn't delay and went outside the company building. Soon he saw a group of people wandering on the street wearing plain clothes. These people were civilians with poor living conditions. Some of them hadn't even bathed for many days. They were sweaty and mixed with a strange smell. Dean had to get close to them to smell it, but his sense of smell was so sensitive that he slightly frowned. These people were sitting under the shade of trees on the roadside. They seemed to know that the Randy company was not easy to deal with, so they didn't approach the company. They just waited on the roadside. No wonder the company's robot security couldn't expel them. Although the consortium was powerful and could easily kill a few people, they obviously didn't have the intention to kill a large number of poor people for Zhang Lanxin, a researcher. Moreover, Zhang Lanxin didn't report to the company, so she could only suffer. Dean glanced at them. There were more than 40 people. He didn't immediately go forward. Instead, he used the communicator to contact his secretary, Zhu Ying, and asked him to transfer the money to his account. After looking at the amount of the remittance, he walked toward the group of people under the shade of the street. Seeing someone coming over, the 7 people under the shade suddenly showed vigilance. They stopped fanning themselves, slowly stood up and looked at Dean vigilantly. The other money collectors under the shade of the surrounding trees also stood up and stared at Dean with a bit of nervousness on their faces. Are you all looking for Zhang Lanxin for money? Dean faintly looked at the people in front of him. As they heard him mention Zhang Lanxin, the tension on the faces of the people around him suddenly disappeared and turned into anger. Among the 7 people, a middle-aged man with a strong figure stepped out. He seemed to be the representative of the crowd. He said angrily, Who are you? Who are you to Zhang Lanxin? Dean saw their aggressive attitude and said with a smile, What? Do you want to behave atrociously in the Randy company? Don't you know where this place is? The middle-aged man coldly snorted. Who said we are going to cause trouble here? We are just waiting for someone and passing by. Why? Are people not allowed to stand on the roadside? Dean smiled and said, Don't get excited. I'm here to give you money on behalf of Zhang Lanxin's mother-in-law. She knows that you are in trouble, so she specifically asked me to come over to help you get through the difficulties. The people heard the words and their faces were obviously relieved. Who are you to Zhang Lanxin? Her son? The middle-aged man looked at Dean. His face gradually turned cold. We are all waiting for money. There are so many people. Do you think you can get so much money? How much do you need? Dudian smiled. The middle-aged man and the people around him looked at each other. At this time, the others slowly came over and surrounded Dean. If an ordinary person saw this scene, they would think that they were robbers and would inevitably panic. But Dean looked calm. He just quietly watched them discuss. He even saw that the other side seemed to think that his attitude was good. Moreover, he was young and ready to ask for more. He could clearly see the winks that they were secretly giving him. We have a total of 43 people here. Some of us need money for treatment, some of our houses have collapsed, and some of our sons have died. All of us need money. We need at least 1 or 200,000 for each of us. Add it up to 8 or 9 million. Do you have enough? The middle-aged man looked at Dudian and said in a cold voice. Dean slightly narrowed his eyes. 200,000 federal coins is equivalent to the income of a small rich family for half a year. You really dare to ask for it? The crowd saw that he seemed to be unwilling, and suddenly began to talk. 200,000 is a lot for us, but what is it for rich people like you? Zhang Lanxin is an expert of Landy Company. I don't know how much money she earns every year. How can she not take out such a small amount of money? Do you think we are fools? Yes, you are too cold-blooded. We are so poor that we can't even eat. We are reluctant to give a little. You have so much money. Isn't it given to you by us? Isn't your food and clothing made by us commoners? You can save a little money, but it is enough for us to use for a lifetime. Dean smiled and was indifferent to the noise of the crowd. He didn't even blink his eyelids even though the spittle was flying. The middle-aged man didn't expect the young man to be so calm. Knowing that it was meaningless to condemn him, he immediately raised his hand to signal everyone to be quiet. Soon everyone stopped. Zhang Lanxin can earn so much money just by going on a TV show. We don't need much. If you can't give us the money, then let Zhang Lanxin come out and tell us. I don't believe that she has no money, the well-built middle-aged man said coldly. Dean smiled softly and said, You are right. We can still take out this money. Isn't it just 8 or 9 million? I have 10 million here. As long as it can help everyone. The crowd was a little stunned. They didn't expect that Dean would agree after just a few words. For a moment they were a little embarrassed, but soon they thought of the money in their hands. Their eyes suddenly became eager. They stared at Dean and wanted to grab it themselves, but the rule of law of the Federation was deep in their bones. They didn't dare to really do it. They just stared at the communicator in Dean's hand. I said, Grandma Lanxin is a good person. How can she be reluctant to give money? If she gave it earlier, we wouldn't have to waste time waiting here for so long. I'm dizzy from the sun. That's true. Little brother, give the money. Everyone urged with enthusiasm. Dean raised his hand slightly. After everyone was quiet, he said, Don't worry, everyone. It's hard for you to come here to ask for money. I'll give you the money. In addition, I'll call a few cars to send you back. I hope you can live a good life after you go back. Don't let Grandma Lanxin down. Yes, we will. Everyone agreed again and again. Dean immediately entered the company's internal authority on the communicator and mobilized a magnetic train. It was said to be a train, but it was slightly wider and longer than the old bus. The interior space was more comfortable. After everyone got on the train, Dean also went on the train. He set the train on autopilot and chose a route. Soon, the train started smoothly. Where's the money? Do you want to go with us? The middle-aged man saw that Dean also got on the train. He didn't look good and seemed to feel that something was wrong. Dean raised his hand slightly and said in a loud voice, Everyone, I'm going to transfer the money to everyone now. Sit down one by one. It's not good to mess up the order. Otherwise, don't blame me if someone doesn't get the money. The effect of these words was very good. There were some people who were still bewildered but also sat down. Dean immediately began to transfer the money according to the seat. Everyone saw that he really transferred the money. They were relieved and excited. It didn't take long for everyone on the train to receive Dean's transfer. Dean sat in the front of the train after the transfer was completed. He looked out of the window at the scenery. The speed of the train was very fast. It had already left the wealthy area along the city track and came to a remote town on the outskirts. Even a large Federation city like the first Vow City had barren areas, just that there weren't many of them. The train continued to move through 2 remote towns along the way. "My house is here. Stop the train." Someone saw that the train was about to leave the town and quickly shouted. Dean didn't pay attention to it. When the man shouted even louder, Dean said, "First send the people far away, and then send the people near. Don't worry, just take it as a ride." While he was talking, the train had left the town. The man saw this and was a little angry, but he could only sit down silently. After the train drove out of the town, it came to the suburban road. There were 2 roads. One road had painted signs on it, while the other road looked a bit dilapidated. However, the train was heading towards the dilapidated road. At this time, many people had noticed that something was wrong. The middle-aged man stood up and glared at Dean. "Where are you taking us?" Dean also stood up and turned around. He looked at the crowd and said, "Where are we going?" "Of course, to send you to die." As soon as the words came out, the whole train boiled. Everyone stood up and shouted in excitement. Some of them accused Dean. Some of them even cursed loudly. Several young people who were closest to Dean stood up and reached out to grab Dean. They wanted to hit him. Dean slightly lifted his leg and gently kicked the chest of the person in front of him. Only the sound of ribs breaking could be heard. The young man knocked down the people behind him and made them look like a turtle. They couldn't get up for a long time. "What the hell do you want to do?" the middle-aged man angrily shouted. Dean indifferently said, I'm sending you to die." "You dare to kill? Do you want to die with us? If something happens to us, you won't live either. There is no law. Don't think that you are great because you are rich. Kill." Dean faintly smiled as he heard the angry shouts of the crowd. "Of course it is great to be rich. Otherwise, why do you work so hard to make money? Do you really think that your life is valuable? Although the law will protect you, but the law is also based on the words of the people. What do you think you are?" Hearing his words, many people were a little flustered. After all, there were still people who were in awe of the powerful and upper-class people. The middle-aged man's face changed as he sneered. "You have killed so many of our people. Do you think you won't be on the news? You won't be able to escape the death penalty. Then I don't need you dead people to do it." Dean smiled. The middle-aged man seemed to see that Dean didn't mean to intimidate him. He couldn't help but soften his tone. "I don't want the money. I will return the money to you. Stop the car." Chapter 11:21. Seeing Dean's indifferent expression, many people were scared and begged for mercy. "We have no enmity with you. Why do you want to kill us? I beg you to let me go. I don't want the money. I'll give it back to you and I won't trouble you anymore. Let me off, please." The middle-aged man saw that begging for mercy didn't work, so he roared, "Don't think that killing people is not against the law because you are from a big company. There are so many of us. If something happens to us, no one can save you. Ignorant ants." Dean smiled indifferently. "When you forced an old man to give you money, you already deserve to die. There are few good people in this world. There are even fewer good people who have the ability to help others. Unfortunately, the so-called poor and lazy people like you are ignorant. You can't restrain your greedy nature, so there are fewer good people. So you will meet evil people like me. Unfortunately, when you meet me, there is no turning back. The middle-aged man roared, "Go to hell! Everyone, let's kill him first!" Under his roar, many young men reacted from the panic and immediately pounced on Dean with ferocious faces. Dean looked indifferent. He lifted his foot and kicked the man. Someone approached from the side and was slapped in the face. His whole body turned around like a spinning top and crashed into the crowd. The people behind were frightened by his fierce strength. They stared in disbelief. Dean smiled indifferently. He raised his hand and slapped the automatic navigation system of the train. Electric sparks appeared and the navigation system was smashed. Then he jumped and hit the metal plate of the train above his head. He stood on the edge of the hole. No one had ever seen such a terrifying, inhuman power. All of them were dumbfounded, their faces filled with shock. No one knew who suddenly shouted. The middle-aged man woke up and saw the end of the road in front of the train. There was a collapsed fault. His pupils shrank and he screamed in horror. Dean jumped off the train. The navigation system of the train was damaged, but it continued to move forward without slowing down. After he jumped off the train, it rushed straight toward the highway fault and crashed. Dean slowly walked to the edge of the fault and saw the train rolling from the landslide under the fault to the cliff 100 meters below. The body of the train was already smoking. His eyes flashed, but he didn't go up to stab it. Instead, he floated away. The headquarters of the Terrace Financial Group. Located in the center of the city, it covered an area of tens of millions of square meters. It was the king of luxury houses. One had to know that every inch of land in the city center was worth an inch of gold. Even a residential house of 100 square meters would cost millions of federal dollars. What was the concept of tens of millions of square meters? It was equivalent to the core of Dujon City, and it was all included in the garden of the Terrace Financial Group's headquarters. Just this piece of land alone was worth hundreds of billions. Even the federal government in the capital city had moved to a second-tier area. This was the domineering nature of the four consortiums. Money was perhaps just a number to them. After all, the Terrace Financial Group was responsible for printing money for the Federation. Money? No one knew how much money the Terrace Financial Group had, but they knew that the Terrace Financial Group's businesses were spread throughout the Federation. The products produced were sold to millions of households. Whether you were a man or a woman, the elderly or the children, you would use the Terrace Financial Group's products in all aspects. At this moment, in the tallest technology building in the Terrace Financial Group's villa complex, the dim light shrouded every corner of the room. There was only one huge room on the top floor. It was extremely spacious, like a palace, but it was simpler than a palace. There weren't too many luxurious decorations. There were only holes embedded in every corner of the room, emitting a faint light. The floor was not a floor, but a transparent mirror. Dressed in a black and gold robe like that of a priest, Black Elodie slowly walked in from outside the room. His feet stepped on the transparent floor, as if he was walking in midair. Beneath the transparent floor was not the image of the next floor, but a deep and vast darkness. There were specks of light, like the stars in the universe. Black Elodie's body was perfectly straight, but his head was slightly lowered. With every step he took, he would look at the area less than 5 meters in front of his feet, not daring to go any further. He just walked step by step, silently remembering in his heart. When he took the 12th step, he immediately stopped, then bowed slightly, and said in an extremely respectful tone, "Black Elodie greets the core deity. What orders do you have for me?" A young, yet extremely indifferent and condescending tone came from above Black Elodie's head. "That demon has caused trouble again. Go and clean up the mess." Black Elodie was slightly stunned and said doubtfully, "The one that was sent to the Landy Company? He dares to cause trouble instead of staying in the company obediently? He did it on purpose. He wanted to see the bottom line of my tolerance." There was no trace of emotion in the indifferent voice. "Go." Black Elodie's heart tightened as he quickly bowed. Yes, Lord God. After saying that, he bowed slightly and slowly turned around to leave. Before he left, he glanced in front of him from the corner of his eyes and saw an incomparably dazzling light. It was as if a god was emitting light. He walked out of the room quietly, and when the alloy door slowly closed, he felt that the air was much lighter. He breathed a sigh of relief, and his eyes flickered slightly. He said to himself in his heart, "It's that demon again. Lord God is so concerned about him. What is it for?" Dean casually called a car and went back to the company after entering the town. Dean used his X-ray vision to scan each floor. He found Zhang Lanxin's figure and went straight to the top floor of the laboratory. The door of the laboratory opened as Dean entered and saw Zhang Lanxin, Kong Ji and 4 other experts who were busy with the experiment. They were in a group. Once the project was successful, they would get great fame and benefit. Noticing that someone had come in, many people turned to look. They frowned as they saw Dean, but ignored him and continued to work. Zhang Lanxin put down the chemicals in her hand as she saw Dean come back. She quickly walked over and whispered, "Did they leave?" "All gone." Dean used a different tone when he said gone. Zhang Lanxin didn't hear the difference. She was relieved and quickly asked, "How much did they ask for?" "A lot?" Dean smiled and showed her the transfer form. "It's not much. 200,000 per person. A total of more than 8 million. I can't afford it." "So much?" Zhang Lanxin was a little surprised but soon became annoyed. She lowered her head and sulked. "Grandma Lan Xian, don't take it to heart. It's just a small amount of money. They promised that they won't come again. But Grandma, you don't have to care about these people anymore. There are countless poor people in the Federation. If you can't help them, they will become ungrateful wolves." Zhang Lanxin nodded heavily and said, "I know. I've seen through this matter clearly. I won't do such a stupid thing again. But child, your money." She thought for a moment and solemnly said, "I'll return it to you." Dean smiled. "We will talk about this later. Grandma, you are busy with the experiment. I won't bother you." Zhang Lanxin felt the dissatisfied eyes of others. She didn't say anything more. "Then you can look around here. If there is anything you don't understand, feel free to ask me. I'm going to work." Chapter 11:22. Dean wandered around the laboratory for a moment and then left. He went to an empty laboratory, pulled a chair next to the bookshelf, and flipped through the information inside. With his authority, he could enter these laboratories that were not open at will. Compared to reading carefully in a laboratory where there were people, he could be more casual here. It was just that he could not understand most of the information here. However, he memorized all these formulas. Once he learned the formulas and what the nouns represented, he would be able to master them immediately. He found a notebook and wrote down the things he didn't understand. Then he went to the dining room in advance and ordered a meal. After Zhang Lanxin and the experts from the laboratory came down to eat, Dean immediately ordered a meal. At this time, Zhang Lanxin came to the dining room. She noticed Dean sitting in a conspicuous position under the reminder of Kong Ji. She was stunned for a moment and then directly came over. "Little Qin, this time thanks to you." Zhang Lanxin's face was full of gratitude and very sincere. Dean pulled a chair and invited them to sit down, saying, "It's a small matter. Grandma Lanxin doesn't need to thank me. I've heard that 9 million is not a small number even for us. These people are really ruthless. They are simply evil wolves. They say that the poor are pitiful, and that there must be something hateful about them. They are absolutely right." Although Kong Ji was old, his tone was filled with righteous indignation like a young man. If Zhang Lanxin didn't tell him that Dudian had shown her the transfer list, he wouldn't have believed that Dudian was telling the truth. He hated the debt collectors even more after he confirmed that Dudian was telling the truth. Dean smiled and didn't deny it. Although 9 million wasn't a big deal to him, he couldn't act too indifferent. After the two ordered dinner, the three of them ate and chatted. "Little Cheen, I heard that you are studying the experiment and preparing to apply for a research project. If there is anything I can help you with, just tell me." Zhang Lanxin had been looking for an opportunity. After Dean finished dinner, she was afraid that he would leave, so she quickly said. Dean was waiting for this opportunity. Even if she didn't speak, he would take the initiative to speak. He didn't show too much joy, just smiled and said, "I do want to apply for a project from the company. It's not that I don't have a task when they send me here, but my qualifications are too shallow, and I don't understand a lot of things, including the words of you experts. I still need to learn." Zhang Lanxin and Kong Ji knew that Dudian was very eager to learn. Zhang Lanxin happily said, "I can teach you if you don't understand anything." "Yes, you can ask me anything you don't understand," Kong Ji said with a smile in his eyes. He was very optimistic about Dean. Dudian scratched his head. "Will I disturb you and waste your energy?" "It's okay, it's nothing," Zhang Lanxin quickly said, for fear that Dean would refuse and would not be able to find an opportunity to repay. Seeing this, Dean no longer refused, but agreed. In his heart, he said, "Some people get help from others but covet more help. Some people get a little kindness from others, but feel uncomfortable and try to repay. Unfortunately, such people are only a small part." After the two finished eating, Dean took out his notebook and asked for advice. The two saw Dean write down a lot of things in the notebook and were surprised. They didn't expect Dean to be so diligent. In their hearts, they appreciated him more and were happy to give him guidance. "Little Cheen, these are not systematic. At your age, you shouldn't have studied as a graduate student, right?" Zhang Lanxin looked at the notebook and quickly saw the level of Dean's knowledge. Dean nodded. "I just graduated from college. At that time, I only played around and my results were average." Zhang Lanxin smiled and comforted. "It's not too late to learn now. I'll teach you from the beginning. Wait for me to go back tonight, and after I finish the experiment tomorrow, you can come to me." Dean was surprised. "Thank you, Grandma Lanxian, but Grandma, you are old, don't stay up late." "It's okay, I can still eat." Zhang Lanxin laughed. After the two left together, Dean also packed up his things and returned to his residence. Looking at the evening news, he soon found a news about a car crash. The location and the pictures were taken. It was the car that was used for his funeral. "Zhang Lanxin will go back in the evening to sort out the study plan for me. She should have no time to pay attention to these news. These experts usually only pay attention to the news in their own industry. Occasionally, when they have free time, they will look at other news. For the time being, there is no need to worry about anything. Moreover, there is no report on the name of the deceased." Dean looked at the news. He only saw the flattened appearance of the train, and the passengers' faces were full of blood, but it was blurred. Dean believed that Zhang Lanxin should not associate it with those debt collectors. Even if she did, it would not matter. From the news, this incident was defined as an accident caused by the train's navigation failure. "It seems that the consortium is quite indulgent to me," Dean said in his heart. "They know that I am a demon, and that I have killed so many of your people, but they cover for me. They can easily investigate the real reason for the train crash, haha." Dean's eyelids slightly narrowed, flashing a cold light. Although more than 40 people were ordinary civilians, but the Federation was a society ruled by law. It was almost the same as the old era, or even more strict than the old era. Murder? Robbery? All of them would be arrested. There was no underworld in the Federation, only the police. The law was strict. This was a humanistic society. Even if it was a multimillionaire who killed people, they would pay with their life. Occasionally, in the news, Rich people would be arrested and sentenced for violating innocent girls. The law protects every citizen, so the debt collectors dared to be so arrogant. As the saying goes, even if you are rich, even if you are powerful, do you dare to kill me? However, standing at the top of the society, the Terrace Consortium gave Dean the answer. Yes, they dare. The murder of more than 40 people was defined as an accident. Dean deliberately didn't kill them, and even deliberately left his fingerprints when he smashed the navigator. It was to test the energy and reaction of the Terrace Consortium. Now it seemed that the Terrace Consortium could cover the sky with one hand in Duyo City. Even the scope was not limited to Duyo City, but more than half of the Federation. The Consortium didn't send anyone to warn me. It seems that this small matter didn't even touch 1/10 of their tolerance. The more tolerance they have, the more they have. They gave me the highest authority so that I can learn a lot of esoteric knowledge. It seems that they are helping me, but if they really want to help me, then they should directly identify themselves, unless there is something difficult to say. From all the phenomena, Dean felt that the goodwill of the Terrace Consortium had little to do with helping him. There must be a purpose. It was late at night while he was thinking. Dean sighed softly. This feeling was like a leaf floating in the sea, and it could be destroyed at any time. He couldn't figure out when the wind would come, but the wind would come eventually. He made up his mind to first learn the knowledge, and then solve the problem of his heart. If it wasn't for the burden of his heart being too low, he felt that his body could erupt with unimaginable power. Perhaps the transformation of his body by Crimson Moon was far beyond Crimson Moon's expectations. If I can erupt with the power of the king, then even if the Terrace Consortium wants to kill me, I should be able to protect myself. The strongest weapon they have, besides nuclear bombs, should be laser weapons. Dean thought in his heart. It should be impossible to use nuclear weapons to attack him. After all, he was in the Federation. It was better to let him go than to use nuclear weapons to destroy a demon. Chapter 11:23. Time flew by. Dean read materials by himself during the day, and looked for Zhang Lanxin to tutor him in the evening. Kongji occasionally taught him some obscure biological knowledge. Dean's knowledge level was rapidly improving. Thanks to his photographic memory and diligent self-study, he made rapid progress. Many things were taught by Zhang Lanxin once, but Dean completely mastered them. His amazing IQ made the two old experts speechless. 3 months passed in the blink of an eye. Dean felt that it was almost time, so he applied to the company for the Walking Dead experiment project. Faster than he expected, the company didn't let him wait for long. The project was approved that night. The first batch of investment funds reached 50 million, and he was promoted to project director. He could select other experts of the company to participate in the experiment. After the news spread, Dudian immediately became a sweet potato in the eyes of many experts. Although some people were jealous, but on the surface they were still very polite to Dudian, and even did not hesitate to compliment him, hoping to be selected by Dudian and pulled into his experimental project. After all, the first batch of funds for the experimental project was so high. Obviously, the company and the consortium had high hope. Moreover, they heard that Dean's research had not made any progress for many years. Once the experiment was successful, it would absolutely be a shocking work. They would also jump to become top experts and be included in textbooks for hundreds of years. Even if the experiment failed, it would have little impact on them. The main person in charge was Dean. I heard that Qin Mo is the illegitimate son of a board member of the consortium? If he is not an illegitimate son, how can the consortium allow the company to mess around like this? This is not research, it is clearly burning money. A young man in his 20s as the experimental project director, people will laugh to death if they say it out. It's simply nonsense. Previously, the company gave him the highest authority to participate in our experiment. Anyway, he just wants to look at it and doesn't understand anything. Now they actually throw money for him to play. They really treat science as a child's play. It's just a game for the rich. Why do you take it so seriously? Hey, we still do our own experiment. It is estimated that when his experiment fails, it won't be long before he will be transferred by the consortium. Coming here to do the experiment may just be a whim of the other party. Many of the experts in the company with Level 1 authority were discussing this in private. This matter even reached the ears of the ordinary experts, and it became a topic of conversation after a meal. Dean faintly smiled as he heard the discussion. Although these people didn't dare to talk in front of him, but his hearing was so keen that he could cover the entire building. Although the building was soundproof, but his magic marks gave him the ability of extrasensory audiovisual. Even if it was a completely sealed soundproof room, he could still hear it clearly. It's not just you who can't figure out what the consortium is thinking. Even I can't figure it out. Dean smiled in his heart. After the meal, he thought about the names of the experts who would form the experimental project. There were only 4 of them. Zhang Lanxin, Kong Ji, Chu Huiru and another Chinese man called Malone were the only ones who weren't jealous or ridiculed in the discussions. After receiving Dudian's invitation, the 4 quickly came to the laboratory that Dudian had applied for. Chu Huiru was surprised and asked, "Qin Mo, do you want to invite me to participate in your experimental project?" "Yes, do you want to?" Dudian smiled. Chu Huiru thought for a moment. "No problem. Anyway, I don't have any experimental project recently. I just want to do some small research. I have time." "I don't have any problem," Malone said. "Little Qin, both of them are experts in undead research. They have many years of research experience. You have found the right person to find them. But you have invited me and Kong Ji to participate. We aren't good at this." Zhang Lanxin was worried. Dudian laughed. "Grandma Lan Xian, you and Master Kong have profound insights in genetics and neurology. You will certainly be able to play a different role in undead research. Moreover, you have been studying monsters for many years. Maybe you will be able to find common ground between undead and monsters and make new breakthroughs in the experiment." Zhang Lanxin was flabbergasted. "Is it really possible? Let's give it a try," Dudian said. Kong Ji thought for a moment. "What you said is reasonable. In that case, we will give it a try. But little Qin, why did you choose to do this research? You should know that it is basically impossible to cure undead. The probability of failure is extremely high. In case of failure, so much money. It doesn't matter. The consortium has money. We can afford it," Dudian said. But the smile on his face had disappeared. Kong Ji and Zhang Lanxin looked at each other. They were relieved as they thought of the rumors outside. If Dudian was really the illegitimate child of a director, then it wouldn't be a big deal if he lost money. At most, they would be criticized. If it was them, then they would be discredited and driven out of the company. With such a resume, other companies wouldn't dare to use them. They didn't refute. Dudian immediately signed the experimental confidentiality contract with the 4 people and officially started the project. The funds for the experiment had been transferred to Dudian's company account. He could use the company's internal shopping channel to buy materials needed for the experiment. For example, undead for research only cost 50,000 federal coins. It was half cheaper than the market price. He bought a large number of 10 undead. There were different kinds of undead: men, women, children, infected undead of the Federation, and old undead. The next day, Dudian, Zhang Lanxin, and the other 4 people held a meeting to discuss the experimental plan. After 3 days of continuous discussion, they finally formulated the experimental guidelines. Zhang Lanxin and the other 3 people took over most of the work of the experiment. Dudian didn't participate. He was alone in another research. He had the identity of the director. Although others felt strange, they didn't think much about it. Anyway, Dudian was the son of a rich family who came to play. They could take this opportunity to study undead. Even if they failed, they could accumulate valuable experimental experience. Dudian moved a set of instruments to his office in the laboratory room. Studying undead was just a cover for him. Although he was eager to find a way to cure undead, but in the past 3 months, he learned more from the company's experimental data. He knew how difficult it was. It was not something that he could pull Zhang Lanxin and the others to complete in just a few months. For him, the priority was to leave here and restore his freedom. In the future, there would be opportunities to slowly do research. Chapter 11:24. Before preparing for the experiment, Dean used X-ray to check every corner of the office. After confirming that there was no monitoring, he turned off the computer system that recorded the experiment. Then he turned off the synchronous networking function of many instruments and turned these instruments into primitive individual instruments. Without the synchronous recording function, although the instruments would be weakened in data comparison and analysis, but once connected to the network, there was a possibility of being stolen. In this way, even if the Terrace Consortium can use some authority to control the network, or if there is a master hacker behind them, they won't be able to steal my research. Dean moved all the instruments that needed to be connected to the network out of the office, leaving only the instruments that could be used without the network. Although this would increase the difficulty of his research, it was worth it. This office is my territory. They can't monitor it. I don't know how long they can endure before they come to me. Dean's mouth curved into a smile as he immediately began to study. He extracted his own blood, hair, bones, and various organs for dissecting and testing, from shallow to deep. After the body data was analyzed, he used the company's channel to buy the demon warriors cultivated by the Federation. They were at different stages, from hunters to pioneers. As for the Dominator and Abyss-level demon warriors, the price was more than 100 million. He could only wait for the second batch of funds from the consortium. When these demon warriors were sent to the laboratory, their bodies were wrapped in chains and injected with special potions. They could only exert the strength of ordinary people and became Dean's experimental subjects. Zhang Lanxin and others were surprised to see the 3 demon warriors bought by Dean. They asked Dean, but Dean only said that his research was useful. The 4 of them didn't say anything. After all, Dean was the director and initiator of the project. He had the right to allocate the funds. They could only borrow the instruments in the laboratory to do their own research. The 3 demon warriors were tied to the iron frame of the office. They seemed to know their tragic fate, but no one resisted. Their eyes were filled with gray despair. They seemed to have lost the will to live. Dean disassembled them one by one. Brain tissue, heart, magic marks, blood and other parts. In his hands they seemed to be lifeless machines. While studying these demon warriors, he started the network function of the instrument. Anyway, the company knew that he bought the demon warriors for experiment. Even if the consortium knew the body data of the demon warriors through the network function, it was nothing to Dean. After all, these demon warriors were products of the Federation. They should have been on the experimental bench of the major consortia. After the instrument was connected to the network, Dean's research speed was greatly improved. Many data were automatically analyzed by the system. He didn't have to slowly analyze and record them one by one. This is the picture of magic marks and humans getting along. Dudian saw the physical state of the 3 through the genetic level. The hunter's DNA was mixed with a small amount of magic marks DNA. It was about 1/10 of the magic marks DNA. The color was like a colorful spiral staircase. Just 1/10 of the magic marks DNA had greatly changed the hunter's original human DNA. The most intuitive manifestation of this change was that it gave the hunter power beyond that of an ordinary person. In addition, when the adrenal glands were secreted, it would stimulate the body. The magic mark DNA in the body would cover the human DNA in a short period of time, thus replacing the body with a monster-like body. But this state could not be maintained for a long time. When the magic mark DNA was covered, the cells would divide rapidly. A person's cell division was limited. When the division reached a certain level, it would decline. Stimulating the power of the magic mark was equivalent to overdraft life. Seeing this, Dean knew why the hunters in Sylvia's world died at most in their 70s or 80s. Although they were modified by the magic mark DNA, and the cell division speed was much slower and the number of times increased. But the years of fighting were constantly consuming their life. Assuming that the lifespan of an ordinary human was about 80 years, the lifespan of a hunter was 150 years. But the years of fighting made their lifespan not much different from that of an ordinary person. They even aged faster and died earlier than ordinary people. In contrast, the DNA of the Limitless was mixed with the magic mark DNA. When the body was stimulated into the magic body, the coverage of the magic mark DNA reached 1/3. This was why when the hunter stimulated the power of the magic mark, the appearance was similar to that of a human, but the pupil changed color, the fangs grew, the nails became longer, and so on. But when the Limitless was stimulated the power of the magic mark, the body would change, such as the arms turned into the claws of a monster, becoming neither human nor beast. When it came to the pioneer, half of the DNA in the body was mixed with the magic mark DNA. During the battle, the body would change greatly. The arms turned into beast claws or extended tails, horns on the head, and so on. The manifestation was extremely obvious. It was also called the magic body. From their experiments, it could be seen that the later the magic mark DNA and the human DNA were more closely combined. Dean thought of the scenes of the strong at various stages of the magic mark fighting. Once in the abyss, once they entered the magic body, they would basically turn into a monster, and no human shadow could be seen. Although the face still had the outline of a human, the eyes and the skin on the face were not the structure of a human, or the eyes, or the gelatinous or scaly skin. The DNA of the pioneer is still a double-stranded molecular structure, but mine is a triangular structure. Each side of the triangular structure is composed of different DNA. One side is the human part of myself, one side is the origami factor, and the other side is the white factor. It's like the genetic structure of the iceworm. Dean didn't know whether the other abyss was like this, but he felt that the possibility was very small. However, what made him feel strange was that the higher the physique of a magic scar warrior, the more magic mark DNA would take up. However, the part of his human genes in his body was very strong. It was not swallowed by the origami factor, nor was it covered by the icy magic insects. In addition, his magic mark DNA, such as the splitter, the tortoiseshell, and other magic mark DNA did not appear in his DNA structure. It seemed that they did not exist in his body. He repeatedly checked, but did not find the DNA of these magic marks. He could only give up for the time being, and began to scan his heart. The god's fetus in his heart was beating along with his heart. The heart wrapped around it as if it was its warm bed. However, it was also as if this heart was the god's fetus heart. Every time it beat, the god's fetus body would stretch as if it was breathing. When it is born, it may be the time of my death. Dean's eyes slightly sank. This was a time bomb in his body, and he did not know when it would hatch. He carefully extracted part of the heart tissue, so as to avoid stimulating the heart and the divine fetus inside. It was just a little bit of tissue. For him, although it was a little painful, it was still bearable. After all, his physique was not that of an ordinary person. Chapter 11:25. This part really is the pure structure of the origami. Dean's eyes turned cold as the heart tissue was analyzed by the instrument. The pure flesh and blood of the origami had become the core organ of his body and supplied blood to his body. It involved all aspects of the body but unexpectedly didn't have any repulsive properties. It was like implanting a beast's limb into a human's body. The tissue around the limb would die, but there was no such situation around his heart. The flesh and blood of origami seemed to be integrated with his body. Through the research, Dean found that the flesh and blood of origami seemed to be a collection of origami genes in his body. The origami gene was too powerful, so it wasn't completely integrated into his body. Instead, it was gathered in the form of a heart. This meant that as long as he could find an organ that could replace the heart, then he could remove the golden heart. He could also embed the flesh and blood of origami into other parts of his body, such as fingers or wings, to increase his combat ability. The embryo in the heart seemed to be very young, and the structure of the embryo was very unstable. Dean estimated that he wouldn't be in any danger in a short period of time. He used various instruments to continue the in-depth research. In the following days, he bought a variety of materials from the company's internal shopping channel. There were different kinds of undeads and different kinds of monsters. He also bought a batch of insects. Half a month later, he also bought some plants that were contaminated by nuclear radiation. There were also some strange semi-biological plants. He didn't know the reason why these semi-biological plants grew flesh-like tissues. When they were injured, they would bleed bright red blood or dark green blood. The blood composition could be tested. Although this kind of plant was rare in the post-disaster world, but the Federation had searched for hundreds of years and had already found countless of them. There were detailed introductions in textbooks. Dean thought of the forest of despair that he encountered when he first stepped into the abyss. There were huge plants lurking in the ground waiting for the opportunity to hunt the creatures on the surface. Whether it was a human or a powerful monster that stepped into the forest, they would become food on the plate and be digested without leaving any bones. In the old era, there were plants like Venus flytrap that would passively prey on things that touched it. However, the way that Dean met the roots and vines of the forest of despair was extremely fierce. It was as if they were conscious. For Dean, living plants were not so shocking. Zhang Lanxin and others were somewhat stunned and confused by Dean's series of actions. They didn't know what he was doing. He was obviously studying the undead, but he found a lot of messy things. Was he trying to find the common ground of the undead from these monsters and plants, and find another way to solve the problem of the undead? They could only think of this explanation. Although they felt that it was whimsical, there was no way to dissuade Dean. In the highest building of the Terrace Consortium's manor, dressed in formal clothes, Blackeldian lowered his head modestly and slowly walked into this star-like room. Under his feet were the deep darkness and the vast stars. The world around him also seemed to be infinitely far away, as if he was really in the vast universe. It was not his first time to come here, and he was not as shocked as he was at the beginning, silently counting his steps in his mind. Lord God, the demon boy you asked me to take care of has applied for another batch of research fees from the consortium. Do you need approval? Black slowly stopped and asked respectfully. Yes. The voice was extremely indifferent, but there was a kind of majesty that overlooks all living beings. Black slowly respectfully said, Lord God, you asked us to monitor the demon boy, but he is doing experiments in his office every day. Moreover, he has destroyed all the monitoring equipment in the office. The instruments are not connected to the network. We can only speculate what he is doing through his consumption channels, but his behavior is a bit strange. It seems like he is playing around. I suspect that he may be deliberately consuming us or testing our patience. There was no sound after he finished. While Blackelody was feeling nervous, the extremely indifferent voice slowly said, He just thinks he's smart and thinks that he can deceive others by destroying the surveillance. He doesn't know that he's just burying his head in the sand. Mortals are so stupid. Black Slody was startled. Is he secretly planning something? He is borrowing the high-end equipment of the laboratory to study his own body. It seems that he is very confused about his own body. It also shows how backward the society of the Demon Empire is. It can't even withstand a single blow. That indifferent voice carried a trace of arrogance, seemingly very disdainful. Black Slody bowed his head and laughed. Lord God is right. How can the civilization of the Demon Empire be compared with us? They are just a group of ignorant primitive people who have been blinded by power. If we didn't find the remnants of civilization from the old era, then I reckon that they would still be living a primitive life. The demon race has been fighting frequently recently. It seems that there are some unusual movements. You must send someone to find out the reason. Yes. Go back. Lowering his head respectfully, Black turned around and slowly left the room. When the door was closed behind him, he finally let out a sigh of relief. However, his expression became a bit solemn. Calmly looking at the perforated monitor in front of him, he slowly walked out. 2 months passed. When Dean came out of the laboratory, he felt a sense of resurrection. When the sun shone on his body from the window, he felt that his stiff body seemed to have regained some vitality. In the past 2 months, the progress of Zhang Lanxin and others' experiments was extremely slow. They had failed many times, but the results were very few. It was a blow to the 4 of them. Fortunately, Dean didn't blame them. Instead, he comforted them. If it was another laboratory, they would have declared the project a failure. But Dean was still persevering. His persistence not only moved Zhang Lanxin and the others, but also surprised him. After 2 months of in-depth research, he had studied many kinds of life. Originally, he wanted to compare them with his own body, origami factor and magic mark gene. But in the process of research, it was as if he had opened a magnificent new world. He saw the richness of life and even the essence of life. Now, if he wanted to, he could even do brain replacement surgery. He could change the brain tissue into another body so that life could continue in the new body. Such a top-notch surgery could only be performed by the top medical experts in the Federation. Moreover, the failure rate was extremely high. Even many tycoons did not dare to attempt it easily. They would only take the risk when they were really on the brink of death. Chapter 11:26. In Dean's view, when life evolved to the limit, all the potential was stimulated, and it was enough to be called a god. The so-called god had endless life, omnipotent power, and could destroy the world. Even nuclear weapons couldn't kill them. Once the potential of life is played to the extreme, it would be enough to become such an existence. Dean saw the possibility through the research. For example, the ice worm had a long lifespan and could adapt to all kinds of harsh environment. It could survive no matter how powerful the toxins, the lack of oxygen or the lack of food. The only way to kill it was to freeze it at absolute zero or obliterate it with high temperature. Under absolute zero, its body could be destroyed, but once it left absolute zero, it would recover again, and the high temperature would be even more thorough, annihilating it into dust. This was also the reason why the nuclear explosion in the old era repelled the iceworm. Compared to the iceworm, origami seemed to be its natural enemy. The cells of origami had omnipotent devouring ability, and it could completely devour and digest the tough cells of the iceworm. Through research, he found that in addition to devouring the iceworm, the origami could also devour other life forms and turn them into its own food, including plants. It could be described as a super omnivore. Even rocks, soil, it could extract nutrients from them. It could eat anything. In Dean's view, if the abilities of these two races were combined, it would be invincible, it would be like a god. and his body contained these two types of genes. This was probably the crystallization of Crimson Moon's research, and it was also what she thought of as God. All along, I thought that the magic mark brought power to the body, but I didn't expect it to be so. Dean's eyes flashed. The past 2 months of research had allowed him to see more details. The relationship between the magic mark and the human body was like the relationship between the key and the treasure. The magic mark was just a key, and it stimulated the body's potential and exerted the magic mark's ability. In fact, the potential of the cells was extremely broad, and it could be described as ever-changing. Different magic marks brought different abilities, just like different keys to open the same treasure house, but each door was different, so the released power was also different. The magic mark was just a primer, the source of power still came from the body. This was just like humans. Different viruses would lead to different diseases and different changes. However, if it was a rock, there would not be such changes. The root of the problem was that humans had the ability to adapt to such changes. When he was studying before, he did not see his own magic mark genes in the gene chain. But later on, he discovered that these magic mark genes had long been swallowed by the origami factor, and the door they opened had been permanently opened. This meant that even if he stripped off his magic mark, he still had the ability to do so. Generally, hunters and even pioneers would lose their original magic marks once they stripped them of their magic marks and replaced them with new ones. This was because the hidden door in their body was not strong enough to open it by themselves. In short, it was like the door was opened halfway, and then the key was pulled out, and the door would automatically close. However, the desolate god gene had melted this key, completely embedding it within the hole of the door, causing the door to be unable to close. This discovery was of great significance to Dean. Before, he did not dare to absorb too many magic marks, not only because he was afraid that his power would be too complicated, but also because he was afraid that his body would be damaged. Just like a glutton, it was inevitable that he would eventually die of the dissection. But now that he knew the reason, he could unscrupulously absorb different magic marks, and use these magic marks to stimulate the many abilities of his body. However, when he saw the possibility of becoming a god, this surprise was not so big. In his view, this was the ability that would naturally be mastered after the life had progressed to a certain level. Perhaps after surpassing the king level, he would have such an ability. Without the help of magic marks, he could rely on the tempering and control of the genes to extend the different abilities of the genes. Every cell in the body was like his own fingers, and could be controlled and trained at will. The hand could be clenched into a fist, and it could also be used as a sword. The changes of cells were far more complicated than the 5 fingers, and they could be ever-changing. If one wanted to condense X-ray vision, they could condense it. If one wanted to grow scales, they could grow scales. At this point, he was no longer a human nor a beast. He could turn into a beast, a giant, a rock, or a piece of water. In Dean's view, this was the evolution of life that had been tempered to the extreme, that is, God. These sounded like fantasies, but it was precisely the possibility that Dean saw with the most sophisticated high-end instruments. If his research data was published online, it would be enough to shake the scientific and technological community of the Federation and shatter the worldview of countless people. However, Dean never believed that things that couldn't be explained by science and technology didn't exist. Not to mention that the things he saw brought about this conjecture, and it happened that scientific instruments helped him to see it. Technology and knowledge were only tools to help humans understand the universe. Technology couldn't explain it, but it didn't mean that it didn't exist. Existence was the truth. If technology couldn't explain it, then it could only mean that technology was too backward. The magic mark is like a phantom. The process of releasing the power of the magic mark is like the human body copying the phantom of the magic mark. At the hunter stage, one can only copy the power of the magic mark. At the abyss walker stage, one can completely copy the power of the magic mark and turn into a monster. But after all, this is just a copy. Once the original painting of the magic mark is gone, it will lose its power. But how can the real strong rely on copying? The kings of the empire didn't copy, but the magic mark took over their brain. It was like a painter who copied a famous work, but was completely obsessed with it and forgot himself. In the empire, the first warriors weren't magic mark's warriors, but the witches. They implanted the flesh and blood of the monster into their body. It was similar to copying. However, the witches gradually disappeared. They weren't replaced by the magic mark's warriors. There seems to be a gap in the middle. Perhaps there was a warrior who relied on their own evolution to show extraordinary power. Dean's eyes flashed. The top secret information and chronicles of the giant wall flashed in his mind. This possibility was not impossible, but if there was, it meant that the water of the empire was deeper than he imagined. If there was a warrior who relied on their own evolution to surpass the strength of ordinary people, then why did they disappear? Unfortunately, after all, he didn't come into contact with the core secrets of the empire. What he saw today was based on the detection of the instruments in the Federation. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.